Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to a time when sleeping well wasn't a luxury or a struggle. It was simply survival. You're going back 30,000 years to the last ice age, when glaciers covered a third of the planet and humans lived in caves carved by ancient waters. And here's the strange thing, they slept better than you do. Better than almost anyone you know. No melatonin gummies, no white noise apps, no weighted blankets shipped from Amazon. Just stone, fire, darkness, and a kind of rest so deep that modern sleep scientists study it with something close to envy. Tonight, you'll discover why a caveman who faced saber-toothed cats and hunted woolly mammoths in sub-zero temperatures could close his eyes and drift in a sleep more easily than you can after a day of emails and Netflix. You'll learn what we lost when we left the caves. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find a way to bring some of that ancient rest back into your own life. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere in the world right now, drop a comment telling me where you are and what time it is. I love knowing that someone in Tokyo is drifting off while someone in Toronto is just settling in. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Close your eyes. Breathe slowly. You're about to become a caveman, and you're about to sleep better than you have in years. The last great chill begins. You need to understand when this all started. 115,000 years ago, give or take a few thousand years, Earth's climate took a turn that would reshape everything about human existence. The worm glaciation, as scientists call it, or the Wisconsin glaciation if you're in North America, began its slow, relentless creep southward. Temperatures dropped. Ice sheets miles thick formed over what would one day be London, Toronto, Stockholm. Sea levels fell by 400 feet as water locked itself into glaciers, exposing land bridges between continents. And your ancestors, not quite modern humans yet, but close enough, had to adapt or die. Most died, but some learned to sleep through it. The change wasn't sudden, of course. No one woke up one morning to find their world buried in ice. It took generations. A slightly longer winter here, a failed summer there, harvests getting thinner, animals migrating to follow warmth and food. Historians still argue whether early humans understood what was happening on a planetary scale, or if each generation simply thought, well, this year is colder than grandfather remembered. Either way, they moved. South mostly, following herds, following rivers that still flowed, and crucially, following caves. Because here's something you might not realize. Caves aren't just holes in rocks. They're thermal batteries. The Earth holds heat and cold differently than air does, stabilizing underground temperatures in ways that made certain caves more valuable than any amount of surface shelter. A good cave in the Ice Age meant the difference between making it through winter and becoming a frozen curiosity for archaeologists to find 100,000 years later. Your ancestors knew this instinctively. They could read stone the way you read reviews on Yelp, looking for the perfect combination of depth, drainage, defendability, and direction. South-facing entrances to catch what little sun appeared. Elevated positions to avoid flooding when ice dammed rivers and created sudden lakes. Narrow throats that could be defended, but not so narrow you'd trap yourself. And they found them. All across Europe, Asia, even into the Middle East and parts of Africa that grew unexpectedly cold. Lascaux in France. Altamira in Spain. Shanidar in Iraq, where Neanderthals buried their dead with flowers. A detail so tender it makes you wonder what their dreams were like. These weren't just shelters. They were humanity's first architecture. And inside them, with fire tamed and families gathered, something remarkable happened. Sleep became ritualized, protected, sacred even. The day had its terrors, hunger, predators, rival groups, injuries that could turn fatal without antibiotics. But the night was yours. If you made it back to the cave, if the fire stayed lit, if everyone you loved was accounted for before darkness made searching impossible, then you could rest. And you did. Deeply. More deeply than you've probably ever slept in your entire modern life. Because when survival depends on being alert during the day, Your body learns to shut down completely at night. No half sleeping with one eye on your phone. No wondering if you sent that email or locked the car. Just darkness, warmth, and the absolute surrender that comes from knowing there's nothing more you can do until sunrise. The Ice Age was brutal, but in its own strange way, it taught humans how to rest. And that lesson, that biological programming, is still inside you, buried under notifications and deadlines and artificial light. But still there, waiting. Your caveman body clock. Let's talk about what happened to your brain every single evening back when you lived in that cave. Because this is where things get interesting. Your ancestors didn't have circadian rhythm disorders. They didn't lie awake at 2 a.m. wondering why they couldn't sleep. They didn't need apps to remind them when to wind down. Their bodies just knew. And the secret was absurdly simple. Fire and darkness. That's it. When the sun set, which happened early in Ice Age winters, sometimes as early as 4 p.m. in northern latitudes, your tribe would retreat to the cave. Someone would build up the fire. Not a roaring blaze, but something steady, controlled. And here's what modern sleep scientists have discovered. Firelight operates at about 1,800 Kelvin on the color temperature scale. Compare that to your phone screen, which blasts your eyeballs with 6,500 Kelvin of blue spectrum light that your brain interprets as midday sun. Your ancestors' brains got the evening memo loud and clear. Fire meant night. Night meant melatonin production. Melatonin meant sleep. No confusion, no mixed signals. No, let me just check one more thing. The pineal gland in your brain, that little pine cone-shaped organ that regulates your sleep-wake cycle, responded to firelight the way a plant responds to water. It drank in the warm, amber wavelengths and started flooding your system with hormones that made your eyelids heavy, made your thoughts slow and dreamy, made your body temperature drop slightly, which is crucial for deep sleep. You can't fight biochemistry, and your ancestors didn't try. When drowsiness came, usually 2 or 3 hours after sunset, they simply stopped resisting. There was no, but I'm not tired yet, or just one more episode. There were no episodes. There was darkness and companions breathing nearby and the crackle of wood burning down to coals. And your body did what millions of years of evolution had programmed it to do. It shut down completely. Historians still argue whether cavemen understood the connection between fire, darkness, and sleep quality, or if they just knew what worked through trial and error. Did they realize that banking the fire too high kept people awake? That certain woods produced smoke that made sleep harder? We'll never know for certain. But archaeological evidence suggests they were remarkably sophisticated about fire management at night. Hearths positioned to warm without smoking out sleepers. Specific woods chosen for long, steady burns rather than dramatic flames. Even the arrangement of stones around fire pits shows deliberate engineering to control heat and light distribution. They were building sleep technology. Without knowing the science, they'd intuited the principles. And there's something else, something modern sleep researchers get genuinely excited about when discussing Ice Age sleep patterns. Your ancestors weren't sleep-deprived. Not chronically, anyway. Sure, a bad night here and there, a sick child, a nearby predator, an injury that throbbed. But on average, they were sleeping 9 to 11 hours per night in winter, 7 to 9 in summer. Not because they were lazy, but because there was literally nothing else to do in the dark. No books to read by candlelight. No late-night talk shows. No doom-scrolling through cave painting updates. When darkness came, you had 3 options: sleep, talk quietly with your tribe, or stare into the fire. And eventually, even the most determined night owl would succumb. Because your circadian rhythm wasn't fighting against artificial light, caffeine, work emails, or the subtle anxiety of modern existence. It was synced perfectly with the planet's rotation, with the seasons, with reality itself. You were, in the most literal sense, sleeping naturally, and your body rewarded you for it with the kind of rest that modern people pay thousands of dollars to sleep clinics trying to recapture. Deep sleep, REM cycles that played out fully without interruption, dreams that felt significant because your brain had time to process them properly. And mornings, we'll get to mornings later, but mornings where you woke without an alarm, naturally, when your body had completed its rest. Imagine that. Imagine never once in your entire life being jolted awake by a buzzing phone or a blaring clock radio. Imagine only ever waking because you were done sleeping. That was normal for 95% of human history, and your body still remembers, still craves it. Even now, as you lie there listening to this, some ancient part of your brain is saying, yes, this, finally. The architecture of stone shelter. Not all caves were created equal. You need to understand this because choosing the wrong cave could kill you just as surely as choosing no cave at all. Your ancestors became expert geologists without ever using that word. They could read stone the way you read street signs. They understood drainage, ventilation, structural integrity, and defensive positioning with an expertise that would impress modern engineers. Because they had to. A cave that flooded when spring melt came would drown sleeping families. A cave with poor ventilation would suffocate them with smoke or carbon monoxide from their own fires. A cave with a single entrance could become a death trap if predators or rival groups blocked the way out. So they looked for specific features. First, elevation. The ideal cave sat high enough to avoid seasonal flooding, but low enough to reach quickly when being chased. Too high meant exhausting climbs while carrying children, firewood, and fresh kills. Too low meant waking to water. Your ancestors learned this the hard way, which is a polite way of saying some of them drowned in their sleep before the survivors figured it out. Second, orientation. A south-facing entrance in the northern hemisphere meant maximum sun exposure during short winter days. Those few hours of direct sunlight streaming into the cave entrance weren't just pleasant, they were psychologically necessary. Seasonal affective disorder isn't a modern invention. Your ancestors got depressed in dark caves during endless winters too. Sunlight helped. Not much, but enough. Third, the entrance itself. Here's where it gets really interesting. The opening needed to be large enough for smoke to escape, but small enough to retain heat and be defensible. Too wide, and you'd spend all night feeding an enormous fire just to stay warm, burning through your precious firewood stores. Too narrow, and you'd choke on smoke or have no escape route. Archaeological sites show evidence of walls built to narrow entrances. Humanity's first renovation projects. Stacked stones, branches woven with dried mud, animal hides stretched on wooden frames. Your ancestors were literally redesigning their caves for better sleep. Fourth, depth and chambers. The deeper you went, the more stable the temperature. But deep caves had problems. No light penetration meant living in permanent darkness. Difficult to defend if something got between you and the entrance. And there's this eccentric detail that historians love. Many Ice Age caves show evidence of different chambers being used for different purposes. Sleeping areas in the deepest, most protected sections. Food storage in cold side chambers. Tool-making areas near entrances where light was better. Even what appear to be toilet areas in specific alcoves or passages. Your ancestors invented the floor plan. They created functional living spaces with designated zones, all without architects or blueprints. Just trial, error, and the motivation that comes from sleeping in your mistakes. Fifth, the neighbors. And I don't mean other human tribes. Many caves were already occupied when humans arrived. Cave bears, massive creatures that could weigh 1,200 pounds, loved the same caves humans wanted. So did hyenas, lions, leopards, and wolves. Historians still argue whether humans violently evicted these previous tenants or waited for them to die out naturally or moved in during seasons when the animals were elsewhere. Probably all three, depending on desperation. But here's the thing. Even after claiming a cave, you weren't necessarily alone. Many archaeological sites show evidence of humans and animals using different parts of the same cave system, sometimes simultaneously. Imagine trying to sleep knowing that a family of cave bears is hibernating 3 chambers deeper, or that hyenas are denning in a side passage. The peace you felt in your chosen sleeping chamber was hard-won and carefully maintained. Every night, someone checked the perimeter, looked for fresh tracks, droppings, territorial markings. Because a cave wasn't just shelter. It was a fortress, a hotel, a hospital, and a home, all wrapped in limestone and darkness. And the better your cave, the better you slept. That's not poetry. That's biology. When your environment feels safe, your nervous system relaxes. Your cortisol drops. Your muscles are not. And sleep comes not as something you chase, but as something that simply arrives. Like weather, like seasons, like night itself. Fire, the original sleep machine. Let's talk about the most important piece of bedroom technology ever invented. Not your white noise machine, not your blackout curtains, not even your mattress. Fire. Controlled, consistent, carefully maintained fire. Because here's what your ancestors discovered, probably by accident. Fire doesn't just warm you and protect you. It actively improves your sleep in ways that scientists are only recently beginning to understand. First, there's the obvious warmth. Ice Age nights could drop to -20 Fahrenheit or colder. Without fire, you'd burn so many calories trying to stay warm that you'd starve even with adequate food. Your body would be in constant crisis mode, shivering, redirecting blood flow, metabolically panicking. You can't sleep deeply when your body thinks it's dying of cold. But with fire, something remarkable happens. Your core temperature stays stable. Your extremities warm up. Blood flows to your skin, which actually helps you cool down slightly. A counterintuitive process that's essential for sleep. Modern sleep scientists know that your body temperature needs to drop about 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit for deep sleep to occur. Too hot, and you'll toss and wake. Too cold, and you'll shiver and wake. Fire helped your ancestors find that perfect middle zone, the Goldilocks temperature. Just right. But temperature was only the beginning. There's something about firelight itself that affects human neurochemistry. Remember that 1,800 Kelvin color temperature we talked about? It's not just gentle on the eyes. It's actually therapeutic. Modern studies using amber light therapy have shown that exposure to warm spectrum light in the evening can increase melatonin production by up to 40% compared to blue spectrum light. Your ancestors were getting natural light therapy every single night, for free. Then there's the sound. You might not think about it, but fire has a voice. The crackle and pop of burning wood. The soft hiss of sap heating and releasing. The occasional shift as logs settle. These sounds are remarkably similar in frequency and rhythm to what sleep researchers call pink noise, a type of sound that's been proven to enhance deep sleep and improve memory consolidation. Your ancestors had the world's first pink noise machine, and it smelled better than anything you can plug in, because fire produces scent too. Different woods release different aromatics when they burn. Pine and fir, sharp, clean, antiseptic terpenes. Oak and hickory, deeper, almost sweet vanillin compounds. Birch, wintergreen notes from methyl salicylate. Your ancestors weren't just burning wood. They were conducting aromatherapy sessions, choosing specific fuels for specific effects, even if they didn't know the chemistry behind it. Historians still argue whether Ice Age humans deliberately selected woods for their sleep-inducing properties or just burned whatever they could find. But archaeological evidence from some sites shows stockpiles of specific wood types near sleeping areas, suggesting intentional choice. They knew something worked, even if they didn't know why. And then there's the hypnotic effect. Have you ever stared into a fire and felt your mind go quiet? That's not just poetic fancy. That's your brain entering a light meditative state. The flickering patterns of flames create what neuroscientists call soft fascination. Engagement that's absorbing but not demanding. Your attention is held but not strained. Your thoughts slow down. Your worries lose their sharp edges. Modern people pay for meditation apps and mindfulness courses trying to achieve the mental state that cavemen got for free just by staring into their evening fire for 20 minutes. And there was a ritual to it. Someone had to maintain the fire through the night. Not blazing. That would waste wood and overheat the cave. But steady, alive, banking the coals just right so they'd last until morning with minimal tending. This wasn't a chore. It was sacred duty. The firekeeper was protecting everyone's sleep, ensuring that if someone woke, a child with a nightmare, an elder needing to relieve themselves, They wouldn't wake to total darkness and panic. The fire was a nightlight, a guardian, a promise that morning would come. And when you close your eyes with that warm glow on your eyelids, with a crackling whisper in your ears, with the scent of burning cedar or pine in your nostrils, your body knew. It's safe now. You can let go. Sleep took you then, not roughly, but like a parent lifting a drowsy child. Gently, completely, without resistance. The social sleep pile. Now we need to talk about something that might make you uncomfortable. Or maybe it'll make perfect sense. Your ancestors didn't sleep alone. Ever. Not by choice, anyway. They slept in what anthropologists call communal sleep clusters, though your caveman ancestors would have just called it how you sleep when you don't want to die. Imagine it. 10, 15, sometimes 20 people. Bodies arranged like puzzle pieces on a bed of furs and dry grass. Children nestled between parents. Elders positioned near the fire. Young adults on the perimeter, where they'd wake first if danger approached. Everyone touching someone. A hand resting on a shoulder. A foot against someone's back. Heads sharing the same pile of moss. Breath mingling in the cold air. This wasn't intimacy. This was survival. But here's the thing. It also happened to be the best sleep aid ever invented. Because human beings are social primates, and our nervous systems are designed to calm down in the presence of trusted others. When you sleep alone in the modern world, some primal part of your brain stays partially alert, scanning for threats, listening for danger. You can't fully let go because, on a biological level, being alone means being vulnerable. But when you're surrounded by your tribe, that ancient alarm system finally shuts off. You can surrender completely. Let someone else keep watch. Let someone else worry. Your only job is to rest. Modern sleep studies have confirmed what your ancestors knew instinctively. People sleep deeper and longer when co-sleeping in safe social arrangements. Heart rates synchronize. Breathing patterns align. Stress hormones drop across the entire group. It's called social thermoregulation, and it works on multiple levels. Physically, bodies share heat. On an ice age night, a lone sleeper might burn 3,000 calories just trying to stay warm. But 10 people sleeping together create a microclimate, a warm pocket of shared body heat where everyone's metabolism can relax. You literally save energy by sleeping together, which means you need less food, which means better survival odds. Psychologically, the effect is even more profound. There's a reason babies sleep better when they can hear a parent's heartbeat. There's a reason people report feeling safer with a partner beside them, even if that partner couldn't actually fight off an intruder. We're wired for proximity, for presence, for the reassurance that comes from breathing in sync with other humans. Your ancestors felt this every night. A child whimpering would be soothed without anyone fully waking. Someone shifting position would create a chain reaction of small adjustments, everyone unconsciously accommodating everyone else, like a living organism with many hearts, many lungs, one shared rhythm. Historians still argue whether this communal sleeping arrangement was purely practical or if it had deeper social significance. Did sleeping positions reflect tribal hierarchy? Did people compete for spots near the fire or near specific individuals? Were there politics even in sleep? Probably. Humans are humans, after all. But here's an eccentric detail that archaeologists love. Many Ice Age caves show worn spots in the stone where bodies repeatedly lay in the same positions over years or decades. People had their spots, their place in the pile, and they returned to it night after night, creating literal impressions in rock through the simple act of sleeping in the same beloved position. Imagine that. Sleeping so consistently, so regularly, so completely in one trusted space that you gradually reshape stone itself. That's not just sleep. That's home. And there was sound, too. Not silence. Never silence. The soft snoring of elders. The occasional sleep talk of a dreamer. Children making small noises. Someone shifting, furs rustling. Breathing. Always breathing. A symphony of human presence that told your nervous system, you're not alone, you're not in danger, you can rest. This is perhaps the biggest thing we've lost. Not caves or fires or darkness, but each other. The warm, living presence of trusted people close enough to touch. Modern bedrooms are often designed for isolation. Separate beds, separate rooms, maximum personal space. And we wonder why we sleep poorly, why we wake with anxiety, why the night feels unsafe. Your ancestors would find our sleeping arrangements baffling, even terrifying. All these people, separated by walls, lying alone in the dark. No one watching, no one near, just you and your thoughts and the artificial silence of a sleeping house. How can anyone rest like that? How can anyone feel safe? They couldn't imagine it. And maybe, just maybe, they were right. Predators at the cave mouth. Let's talk about why the social sleep pile mattered so much. Because outside your cave, things wanted to eat you. Not metaphorically. Not your anxieties or your deadline stress or your financial worries. Actual, literal predators with teeth and claws and the patience to wait for you to make a mistake. The Ice Age night belonged to them, and they knew it. Cave lions, bigger than modern lions, with shoulder heights reaching 4 feet, could smell human settlements from miles away. The smoke, the cooking meat, the accumulated scent of many bodies living in close quarters. To a cave lion, your dwelling was basically a restaurant with a glowing sign that said, "Open late." Hyenas were worse in some ways. Smaller, yes, but bold. Collaborative. Smart enough to test defenses, probe for weaknesses, remember which caves had careless humans and which ones fought back effectively. Archaeological sites show hyena tooth marks on human bones. Not all of those humans were dead when the biting started. Then there were the bears. Cave bears, short-faced bears, even early ancestors of grizzlies. These weren't the relatively cautious bears we know today, conditioned by thousands of years of human dominance. These were apex predators that feared nothing. A short-faced bear could stand 12 feet tall and weigh 1,500 pounds. If it wanted in your cave, it was getting in your cave. Your only hope was that it didn't want it badly enough to push past fire and spears. Wolves hunted in packs. Leopards were ambush specialists who could scale cliffs and enter caves from unexpected angles. Even smaller predators, lynx, wolverines, large raptors, posed threats to children or anyone who wandered from the group. The night was genuinely dangerous, and your ancestors knew it, which is why they invented the night watch. Humanity's first job, really. Before farmers, before kings, before priests or merchants or any other profession, there were watchers. People who stayed awake while others slept, who fed the fire, who listened to the darkness, who carried the burden of vigilance so the tribe could rest. It wasn't one person all night, usually. That's too exhausting, and exhausted watchers make fatal mistakes. Instead, they rotated, 2 or 3 hour shifts. You do your watch, then wake your replacement, then join the sleep pile and surrender to rest, knowing someone else had taken over. Historians still argue whether night watch duty was assigned based on age, gender, status, or some rotating system. Different tribes probably did it differently, but archaeological evidence suggests it was often young adults, old enough to be trusted, young enough to have the reflexes and stamina the job required. And here's something modern people don't appreciate. The watchers weren't fighting off predators every night. Most nights, nothing happened. The fire alone was enough to keep most animals at a distance. The watch was insurance. Deterrence. The presence of an alert human made opportunistic predators think twice. But occasionally, more than occasionally, something would test the boundaries. Eyes reflecting firelight at the cave entrance. A low growl from the darkness. The scrape of claws on stone. And then the watcher would have decisions to make. Wake everyone? Make noise? Throw burning brands? Stand ready with a spear? These were life and death calculations made by teenagers and young adults in the middle of the night, running on interrupted sleep and adrenaline. Most of the time, they got it right. Sometimes they didn't. And here's the thing about sleeping in a cave with predators outside. It should have made sleep impossible. The stress, the danger, the knowledge that death was potentially 20 feet away, separated from you by nothing but fire and human vigilance. But it didn't, because your ancestors had something we've lost. Trust. Not naive trust, not blind trust, but earned trust in a system that had worked for generations. Trust in the watcher. Trust in the weapons and fire. Trust in the collective response if something went wrong. That trust allowed surrender. Allowed your nervous system to believe, I'm being protected. I can let go. And so you did. You slept deeply even with cave lions prowling outside. Because the alternative, staying awake all night, every night, in a state of perpetual vigilance, would kill you just as surely as any predator. Maybe slower, but just as dead. Your ancestors had to learn to sleep with danger, had to train their bodies to rest despite real, immediate threats. And they did. Which makes it somewhat ironic that you, living in a world where no predators prowl outside your bedroom window, where locks and walls and police exist, where the statistical likelihood of nighttime violence is historically minuscule. You can't sleep. You lie awake worrying about things that might never happen, about emails and bills and social interactions from 3 days ago. Your ancestors would find this baffling. All this safety, all this comfort, and you waste it on worry. But maybe there's a lesson here. Maybe the key isn't eliminating danger. Maybe it's building systems, internal and external, that you trust enough to let go despite danger. To rest even when the night has teeth. Your ancestors did it with fire and spears and watching. What's your version? The dinner that made you drowsy. Now let's talk about what your ancestors ate before bed. Because diet and sleep are more connected than you might think. In Ice Age, humans accidentally stumbled onto the perfect pre-sleep meal plan. Not through nutritional science or Instagram wellness influencers, but through simple necessity. They ate what they could get. And what they could get, it turns out, was exactly what their bodies needed for deep sleep. High fat, high protein, moderate to low carbohydrates, depending on the season. And crucially, eaten at consistent times dictated by daylight and hunting success. Let's start with the fat. Modern people have been taught to fear fat, but your ancestors survived on it. Mammoth fat, reindeer fat, fish oils from cold water catches, rendered bear fat stored in intestine pouches. They weren't just eating it, they were craving it, prioritizing it, sometimes fighting over it. Because fat is calorie dense, which matters when you're burning 3,000 to 5,000 calories a day, just staying warm and mobile. But here's what they didn't know they were getting. Tryptophan precursors and omega, 3 fatty acids that directly support serotonin and melatonin production. That mammoth steak wasn't just filling. It was pharmaceutical-grade sleep medicine. Then there's the protein. Your ancestors ate a lot of it. Game meat, fish, occasional eggs from raided nests, insects when available. Not lean protein like modern chicken breast, but rich, fatty cuts that included organs. Heart, liver, kidneys, tongue, brain. The parts we've largely stopped eating, but that contain the highest concentrations of B vitamins, iron, and amino acids. Including, yes, tryptophan, the compound your body converts into serotonin and then melatonin. That post-Thanksgiving turkey sleepiness your family jokes about, your ancestors felt that every night. Carbohydrates were seasonal and sporadic. Summer might bring berries, roots, wild tubers. Autumn provided nuts if you could gather them before squirrels did. But winter and early spring? Almost no carbs. Just meat and fat. And here's where it gets interesting. Historians still argue about whether this low-carb existence was detrimental or actually beneficial. Modern science suggests that very low-carb diets can actually improve deep sleep by stabilizing blood sugar and reducing nighttime wakings. Your ancestors weren't experiencing 2 a.m. blood sugar crashes. No sugar highs followed by cortisol spikes. Just steady, sustained energy that gradually depleted through the day and naturally bottomed out at night. Perfect biochemistry for sleep. And then there's the timing. They ate their biggest meal after the day's hunting or gathering was done. Usually late afternoon or early evening. Enough time to digest before sleeping, but close enough to bedtime that the natural post-meal drowsiness coincided with darkness falling. They weren't grazing all day. There was no snacking. Meals were events, communal, focused, and followed by hours of fasting while they slept. Modern research on intermittent fasting shows that 12 to 16 hours without food can improve sleep quality, increase growth hormone production, and deepen cellular repair processes that happen during rest. Your ancestors are doing 14 to 16-hour fasts every single day without trying, without even having a word for it. It was just how eating worked. Here's an eccentric detail. Some Ice Age sites show evidence of specific herbs and plants being consumed in evening meals. Valerian root, chamomile, wild lettuce, which contains mild sedative compounds. Did they know these plants promoted sleep? Or did they just taste good and happen to have that effect? We'll never know for certain. But the pattern repeats across enough sites to suggest at least some intentionality. Your ancestors weren't completely clueless about food-sleep connections. And there was ritual to the evening meal. Sharing food by firelight wasn't just practical. It was social bonding that reduced stress and increased oxytocin, the trust hormone that also facilitates sleep. When you eat alone, scrolling through your phone, your nervous system stays in a low-grade alert state. But when you eat with your tribe, making eye contact, sharing stories, your body registers. I'm safe. I'm fed. I'm connected. All the biological checkboxes for deep sleep get ticked. Then after eating, they'd sit, digest, talk quietly, or work on small tasks, sharpening tools, mending clothing. No vigorous activity. No bright lights. Just gentle, dimming evening that let the food work its magic. The fat slowing digestion and providing sustained energy. The tryptophan converting to sleepy time neurotransmitters. The lack of sugar preventing energy spikes. The communal safety signaling to every cell. Rest is coming. And by the time full darkness arrived, usually 2 to 3 hours after eating, your ancestors were biochemically primed for sleep. Not fighting it. Not needing supplements or sleep aids. Just following the natural progression from hunger to satisfaction to drowsiness to sleep. The way humans did it for hundreds of thousands of years. Before 24-hour restaurants and midnight snacks and the idea that you should be able to eat whenever you want without consequence. Your ancestors knew a secret we've forgotten. Not just what to eat, but when, and with whom, and why. No alarm clocks, no schedules. Here's something that might change how you think about your relationship with sleep. Your ancestors never once in their entire lives were jolted awake by an alarm. Never. Not a rooster crowing at a predetermined time. Not a clock radio blaring news. Not a phone buzzing with aggressive beeps designed by engineers to trigger maximum stress response. They woke up when their bodies were done sleeping. That's it. That's the whole system. Sleep until you're rested, then wake up. Revolutionary, right? Except it was just normal. For hundreds of thousands of years, that's how every human being woke up every single day. And here's what that did to their sleep architecture. It allowed complete sleep cycles. You see, sleep happens in roughly 90-minute cycles. Light sleep, deep sleep, REM sleep, then back to light sleep. Your brain needs to complete these cycles, usually 4 to 6 of them per night, to fully rest and consolidate memories and repair your body. But modern alarm clocks don't care about your cycles. They interrupt wherever you happen to be. Middle of deep sleep? Too bad. Time for work. Finally achieving that REM dream state? Nope. Hit snooze or get up. Your ancestors' bodies got to finish what they started. Every cycle completed. Every stage of sleep honored. No interruptions except natural ones. A child needing attention. A full bladder. An unusual sound that warranted investigation. And even then, they'd often drift back to sleep and complete the cycle. The timing varied by season, which makes perfect sense when you think about it. Winter nights are long. Darkness might last 14 to 16 hours in northern latitudes. So your ancestors slept longer in winter. Not because they were lazy, but because darkness is the biological signal to sleep. And when darkness lasts 16 hours, you sleep more of those hours. Summer brought shorter nights and longer days. Maybe 7 or 8 hours of sleep instead of 10 or 12. But that was fine because summer was less metabolically demanding. Warmer temperatures meant less energy spent on staying alive. More daylight meant more opportunities to gather food. Your body adjusted naturally. Historians still argue whether this seasonal sleep variation was conscious or automatic. Did people decide to sleep more in winter, or did their bodies just do it? Probably both, working in harmony. And here's something modern people have completely lost: the midday rest. Not every day, but when needed. After a particularly exhausting hunt. During the hottest part of summer day, when moving around was inefficient. After a large meal, your ancestors would simply lie down and sleep. No guilt about productivity. No feeling like they were wasting time. If the body said rest, they rested. The Spanish siesta isn't some quirky cultural anomaly. It's a remnant of human biological wisdom that most cultures have abandoned in favor of constant productivity. And without schedules dictating when to sleep and wake, your ancestors developed what researchers call free-running circadian rhythms. Their body clocks were set by natural light-dark cycles, not by social obligations. This created remarkable consistency. They went to bed around the same time each night, roughly 2 to 3 hours after sunset. They woke around the same time each morning, roughly at or slightly before sunrise. Not because an alarm told them to, but because that's when their bodies were done sleeping. Their circadian rhythms were so stable that they probably could have told time by their sleep-wake patterns. Modern people can't do this anymore. We override our body clocks constantly. Stay up late because we're watching something. Wake up early because we have somewhere to be. Sleeping on weekends, trying to catch up. Our circadian rhythms are in constant chaos, receiving conflicting signals, never quite sure what time it actually is. And we wonder why we're tired. But here's an eccentric detail that sleep researchers find fascinating. Some Ice Age cultures may have practiced what's called sentinel sleep, a rotating pattern where tribe members naturally woke at different times throughout the night, providing continuous but distributed vigilance without anyone staying awake for extended periods. One person wakes at midnight, lies awake for 20 minutes listening to the night, then drifts back to sleep. Another wakes at 2 a.m., does the same. The tribe is protected all night long, but everyone still gets complete sleep. Modern studies of isolated tribes without electricity have documented this pattern occurring naturally. Nobody assigns it. Nobody schedules it. Bodies just do it, like your ancestors' bodies did it, without planning or anxiety or setting alarms just in case. The system worked because it was biological, not social, and everyone woke up rested. Imagine that. Imagine waking every single morning feeling actually done with sleep. Not dragging yourself out of bed. Not needing coffee to achieve basic consciousness. Just naturally, gently transitioning from sleep to wakefulness because your body completed its rest. That was normal. That was every day. For almost everyone who lived before the Industrial Revolution demanded we all march to the same schedule regardless of our biology. Your ancestors would find our alarm clocks horrifying. The idea that you deliberately interrupt your own sleep, your own healing, your own dreams. For what? To get to a job on time? To catch a flight? To not miss a meeting? They'd think we were insane. And maybe they'd be right. The sounds of safe sleep. Close your eyes for a moment and listen to what you hear right now. Maybe a fan, traffic in the distance, a refrigerator humming, the house settling, or maybe, if you've done it right, silence. Artificial, engineered silence created by insulation and soundproofing and distance from other humans. Now imagine what your ancestors heard every night for their entire lives. Wind, always wind, moving through the cave entrance, shifting in pitch and intensity as temperature and pressure changed outside. Sometimes a whisper, sometimes a howl, but always there, always providing that constant ambient sound that told them, the night is alive, the world continues, you're still part of something larger. Water. Many caves had it, dripping from ceiling to floor in patient, metronomic rhythm, or running through deeper passages, a distant underground river creating white noise more perfect than any machine you can buy. Or occasionally closer, a small stream that had carved the cave itself, still flowing nearby, its gurgle and splash mixing with breathing and fire crackle. The breathing itself. 10, 15, 20 people sleeping in close proximity creates a symphony of respiration. Some deep and slow, others shallow and quick. Children's breath faster than adults. Elders sometimes rasping or wheezing. The occasional snore. A cough. Someone murmuring in their sleep. This wasn't noise pollution. This was the sound of safety, of not being alone, of being part of a living collective where everyone's presence could be confirmed by ear. Modern sleep experts call this social auditory cues, and they found that people often sleep better with familiar human sounds nearby than in complete silence. Because silence, to your primal brain, doesn't mean safety. It means something's wrong. Silence means predators have stopped moving because they've located prey. Means birds have stopped calling because they've sensed danger. Means your tribe has stopped breathing, which means, well, you don't want to know what that means. But constant, regular rhythmic sounds? That means everything's fine. The fire crackled. We've talked about fire before, but its sound deserves special attention. The pop and snap of wood burning. The hiss of moisture escaping. The soft roar of flames consuming fuel. The gentle collapse as logs burned through and settled into new positions. This wasn't white noise, or pink noise, or brown noise. This was fire noise. And human brains have been listening to it every night for at least 400,000 years, probably longer. We're wired to find it comforting, soothing, proof that the darkness is held at bay. Outside, there are animal sounds. Not always, but often enough. The distant howl of wolves, the scream of a hunting cat, the grunting of bears, or the yipping of foxes. Even the night birds, owls hunting in darkness, their calls echoing across ice and stone. You might think these sounds would terrify people awake. Sometimes they did, if they were close enough or threatening enough. But mostly they were just information. The soundscape of a living world. Your ancestors learned to distinguish between distant sounds, interesting but not alarming, and near sounds that required immediate attention. They developed what researchers call sentinel auditory processing, the ability to remain asleep while continuously monitoring sounds for threats. Your brain does this too, even now. It's why a parent can sleep through traffic noise but wake instantly when their baby cries. Why you can snooze through your partner's snoring but startle awake at the sound of breaking glass. Your ancestors' brains were calibrated to the Ice Age soundscape. The familiar sounds allowed sleep. The unfamiliar sounds triggered alertness. And most nights, almost everything was familiar. Historians still argue about whether Ice Age humans made deliberate noise to enhance sleep security. Did they position noisy items, shells, dried gourds filled with pebbles, near cave entrances as early alarm systems? Did they keep certain animals nearby because their reactions to predators would warn the tribe? Some archaeological evidence suggests yes, but we'll never know for certain. What we do know is that the cave was never silent. And that was good, because in that rich auditory environment, your nervous system could relax, could stop straining to hear danger in the void, could trust that if something threatening approached, the soundscape would change and alert you. Modern people often try to create perfect silence for sleep, eliminate every noise, control every variable. But sometimes, often this backfires, because in that engineered silence, your ancient brain starts listening harder, scanning for threats, creating anxiety where none should exist. Maybe that's why white noise machines work. Why people sleep better with fans running or rain sounds playing. Not because they're covering up noise, but because they're recreating what your ancestors knew instinctively. That the sound of a living world is the sound of safety. And in safety, sleep comes easily, without resistance, without fear. Just the gentle surrender to rest, surrounded by the proof that everything's okay. The wind still blows. The fire still burns. The tribe still breathes. And morning will come, bedding before beds. Let's talk about what your ancestors actually slept on. Because it wasn't stone. Not directly, anyway. Despite what cartoons might have you believe, nobody was curling up on bare rock and calling it night. Your ancestors were sophisticated about comfort. They had to be. Poor sleep meant poor performance during the day. And poor performance in the Ice Age meant death. So they engineered sleeping surfaces with whatever materials they could find. And some of those materials were surprisingly effective. The foundation was usually dry grass, gathered in late summer or autumn when it was at its most abundant, then carried back to the cave in massive armfuls, layer upon layer upon layer, sometimes a foot thick or more. This created insulation from the cold stone beneath. Dead air trapped between grass stems is one of nature's best insulators. Better than many modern materials, actually. Your ancestors were sleeping on the Paleolithic equivalent of memory foam. On top of the grass, moss. The soft kind, gathered from shaded rocks and tree bark. Moss has remarkable properties that modern people have mostly forgotten. It's naturally antibacterial, stays relatively clean even with constant use, retains just enough moisture to remain soft without becoming damp, and it compresses into a cushion that conforms to body shape. Some archaeological sites show evidence of moss being deliberately dried and fluffed before use. Your ancestors knew that fresh moss was too wet, but properly prepared moss was perfect. Then came the furs. This is where things got serious, because not all animal skins are created equal for sleeping. Reindeer hide, common in Ice Age Europe, has hollow hair shafts that trap warmth while remaining lightweight. Mammoth fur was dense and weather-resistant but heavy. Bear fur was luxurious but required killing a bear, which wasn't always worth the risk. Different furs served different purposes. Rougher hides beneath for durability. Softer furs on top for comfort. Smaller pelts stitched together to create larger sleeping surfaces. And here's something historians find fascinating. Many Ice Age sites show evidence of sophisticated hide-working techniques. Scraping to remove fat and flesh. Smoking to preserve and soften. Treating with animal brains. Yes, really, which contain oils that make leather supple. Your ancestors weren't just throwing raw skins on the ground. They were processing them, sometimes for days, to create the perfect sleeping surface. And they maintained these beds, turned furs to even out wear, replaced soiled grass and moss, aired everything out during rare sunny days, kept sleeping areas as clean as possible given the circumstances, because parasites and skin infections were real threats. Some caves show evidence of specific sleeping spots being used for years, even decades. The same family, the same position, the same carefully curated pile of grass and moss and fur. Generation after generation adding to it, maintaining it, improving it. This was furniture. The world's first furniture, really. And it was personalized. Children might have softer, smaller fur arrangements. Pregnant women or nursing mothers got the warmest spots. Elders who felt the cold more acutely received extra layers. Injured or sick tribe members would have their bedding adjusted to their needs. Historians still argue whether sleeping surface quality reflected social status. Did leaders get better beds? Did successful hunters earn softer furs? Or was bedding distributed based purely on need? Different tribes probably handled it differently. But the evidence suggests that most Ice Age communities cared more about collective rest than individual hierarchy when it came to sleep, because everyone needed to be well rested. A tired hunter endangered the whole group. Here's an eccentric detail. Some archaeological sites show evidence of aromatic plants being layered into bedding. Sage, which repels insects. Sweet grass, which smells pleasant when crushed. Even certain flowers during brief summer months. Was this deliberate aromatherapy? Or just pragmatic pest control that happened to smell nice? We'll never know. But the result was the same. Sleeping surfaces that were warm, soft, clean enough, and often pleasantly scented. Compare this to many modern mattresses. Synthetic materials that off-gas chemicals. Springs that create pressure points. Foams that sleeps hot. We've gained convenience and consistency, but we've lost the natural, breathable, adjustable qualities that made Ice Age bedding surprisingly effective. And there was something else, something intangible but important. Those beds were made by hand, built slowly, improved constantly, maintained with care. Every person knew their sleeping surface intimately, had gathered the grass themselves, or helped process the furs, or arrange the moss just so. There was ownership, connection. The bed wasn't something you bought and complained about. It was something you created and took pride in. Something you maintained because it maintained you. And when you lay down on it each night, some part of you knew, I made this. This comfort is mine. I earned this rest. That knowledge, That connection between effort and reward, labor and comfort. Maybe that helped with sleep too. Maybe knowing you'd built your own rest made it easier to surrender to it. Your ancestors didn't just sleep well because of their bedding, but the bedding helped, more than you might think. Temperature, the Goldilocks zone. Here's something that might surprise you. Your ancestors' caves were cold, not freezing. The fire prevented that, but cold by modern standards. Probably around 55 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit most nights. Maybe slightly warmer near the fire. Maybe cooler in the deeper passages. And this wasn't a problem. It was optimal, because your body sleeps best when it's cool. Not cold enough to shiver, but cool enough that your core temperature can drop slightly, which is necessary for deep sleep. Modern sleep science has confirmed this repeatedly. The ideal bedroom temperature for most people is between 60 and 67 degrees Fahrenheit. Cooler than most people keep their homes. Much cooler than most bedrooms in winter when heating systems blast away all night. Your ancestors were accidentally maintaining perfect sleep temperature through simple necessity. The fire warmed them enough to be comfortable under their furs. But the cave itself stayed cool because stone doesn't hold heat well and cold air sinks into lower passages. This created a temperature gradient, warmest near the fire, cooler as you moved away. And people could position themselves according to their personal needs. Children and elders closer to warmth. Adults who ran hot sleeping farther away. Everyone finding their own Goldilocks zone. But here's where it gets really interesting. The temperature fluctuated naturally through the night. The fire would be built up before sleep, creating initial warmth. Then, as everyone drifted off and the fire was carefully banked, temperatures would gradually drop. Not dramatically. Remember, the fire never went completely out, but enough that by the early morning hours, the cave was at its coolest. Maybe 50 degrees in some spots. And this gradual cooling actually helped maintain deep sleep. Your body temperature naturally drops during sleep anyway, part of the biological process. The environmental temperature dropping slightly too supports this process rather than fighting it. Then as morning approached and someone stoked the fire back to life, warmth would gradually return. And that gentle warming helped trigger the natural waking process. No alarm needed, just the subtle cue of increasing warmth and the light of dawn. Compare this to modern climate-controlled bedrooms. Thermostat set to 72 degrees all night long. No variation, no natural cycle, just constant temperature. Your body never gets the cooling cue that it's time for deep sleep. Never gets the warming cue that it's time to wake. Just monotonous stability that actually disrupts your natural rhythms. Historians still argue whether Ice Age humans understood the connection between temperature and sleep quality. Did they consciously manage the fire for optimal sleeping conditions? Or were they just trying not to freeze and accidentally got it right? The evidence suggests both. Archaeological sites show very deliberate fire management. Hearths engineered to provide steady heat without waste, specific with selection for long burns. Careful positioning of the fire relative to sleeping areas. They may not have known the neurochemistry, but they knew what worked. And there's another factor, the furs. Heavy, layered animal skins that trapped body heat while still allowing some air circulation. This created a microclimate under the furs that was significantly warmer than the ambient cave temperature. Maybe 70 to 75 degrees right against the skin. Perfect. You were warm where it mattered, core and extremities, while your face and respiratory system breathed cool air. Modern sleep scientists are just now figuring out that this combination is ideal. Warm body, cool room. But your ancestors lived it every single night. And they could adjust. Feeling too warm? Throw off a layer of fur. Feeling cold? Pull another skin over you or shift closer to the fire. Instant climate control without electricity or thermostats. Just your body's feedback and available resources. Here's an eccentric detail. Some caves show evidence of ventilation engineering. Small channels carved or natural fissures that were deliberately kept clear to allow fresh air circulation while preventing dangerous drafts. Your ancestors understood that sleeping in a sealed space led to problems. Carbon dioxide buildup, excessive humidity, stale air. So they maintained airflow, just enough to keep things fresh, not so much that the cold became unbearable. It's remarkable, really. All this sophistication about temperature management without thermometers or heating systems or any modern technology. Just observation, experimentation, and the inherited wisdom of thousands of generations who'd been perfecting the art of sleep in caves. And the result? Bodies that naturally regulated temperature through the night. Deep sleep that came easily in cool darkness. Mornings that arrived gradually with warmth and light. No fighting with thermostats or waking up overheated at 3 a.m. or freezing because the heating cycled off. Just the natural temperature rhythm that human sleep evolved to work with. Your bedroom tonight is probably too warm. Not by a lot, maybe, but by enough that it's costing you sleep quality. Enough that your body can't drop into its deepest, most restorative states. Enough that you're working against millions of years of evolution that says, cool down, rest deeply, wake with a warming dawn. Your ancestors knew this, not intellectually necessarily, but in their bones, in the way they slept, in the way they woke, and the fact that they never once complained about being sleep-deprived despite living in one of the harshest climates Earth has ever produced. Maybe temperature had something to do with that. Maybe everything, actually. Darkness deeper than you know. Let's talk about something you've probably never experienced. True darkness. Complete darkness. The kind of darkness that existed in caves 30,000 years ago, far from any fire. The kind of darkness that most modern humans will never encounter in their entire lives. Because even when you think it's dark, lights off, curtains drawn, phone face down, it's not really dark. Not like it was. Street lights leak through windows. Digital clocks glow from across the room. Standby indicators on electronics create tiny constellations of blue and green. Your smoke detector has an LED. Your router blinks in another room. Even in rural areas, there's light pollution from distant towns, moonlight, starlight. Your eyes never experience the complete absence of photons. But your ancestors, when they moved away from the fire into the deeper passages of their caves, they entered darkness so absolute that your brain literally cannot process it. Hold your hand an inch from your face. Nothing. No outline. No shadow. No hint of form. Just void. And in that darkness, something remarkable happened. Melatonin production went into overdrive. Your pineal gland, which regulates sleep, is exquisitely sensitive to light. Even tiny amounts, just a few lux, can suppress melatonin by 50% or more. But in complete darkness, melatonin floods your system like a natural sedative. The kind of deep, sustained release that creates the most restorative sleep humans are capable of achieving. Your ancestors got this every single night, not because they were trying, but because artificial light didn't exist. Once the sun set and the fire was banked to a gentle glow, melatonin production ramped up naturally and stayed elevated until dawn. No suppression from phones or tablets or late-night bathroom visits with overhead lights. No partial awakening from headlights sweeping across bedroom walls. Just darkness. Deep, complete, biologically appropriate darkness. And here's something historians find fascinating. The darkness itself may have had psychological benefits beyond melatonin. In complete darkness, your visual cortex essentially shuts down. No stimulation, no processing, no work to do. That part of your brain, which normally uses about 30% of your total energy, gets to fully rest. This creates a deeper quality of neural restoration that partial darkness can't replicate. Some caves were darker than others, of course. Shallow caves near the entrance might catch moonlight or starlight on clear nights. But deeper caves, or those with winding passages, achieved absolute darkness. And archaeological evidence suggests that sleeping areas were often positioned in these darker zones. Not right at the entrance where light could penetrate, but deep enough that darkness was guaranteed. Your ancestors understood, instinctively or through experience, that deeper darkness meant better sleep. There's an eccentric detail that archaeologists love. Some Ice Age caves show evidence of barriers or hide curtains being erected to block light from reaching sleeping areas. Not for privacy, necessarily, but for darkness, to ensure that firelight or dawn light didn't penetrate until people were ready to wake. They were engineering darkness, creating the conditions for maximum melatonin production. Without knowing the science, they'd figured out what mattered. And when you woke in that darkness, and you did wake sometimes, naturally between sleep cycles, you weren't jolted into alertness. Because there was nothing to see, no screen to check, no clock to consult, just darkness and the knowledge that it was still night, still time to sleep. So you'd shift position, perhaps listen for a moment to make sure everything was safe, then drift back down into sleep. No cortisol spike from exposure to light. No mental activation from visual stimulation. Just a brief surface, then back down. Modern sleep studies have tried to recreate this kind of darkness in lab settings. Total blackout conditions with subjects sleeping in specially designed chambers. And the results are remarkable. People in complete darkness show 50% more REM, sleep deeper, slow wave, sleep better memory, consolidation improved, mood upon waking reduced anxiety. Your ancestors got all of this naturally, for free, every single night. Compare that to modern sleep, where even a street light through curtains or a phone notification lighting up your nightstand can fragment sleep quality by measurable degrees. Historians still argue whether Ice Age humans appreciated the value of darkness or just dealt with it as an unavoidable aspect of night. But the archaeological evidence, those deliberately darkened sleeping chambers, those hide curtains, those deep cave sleeping positions, suggests they knew. Maybe not intellectually, but in the way that matters most, behaviorally. They sought darkness, protected it, used it as a tool for better rest. And they slept in that darkness without fear. Because they weren't alone. The tribe surrounded them, breathing softly in the void. The fire glowed distantly, proof that protection remained. And their bodies, so perfectly calibrated to natural light-dark cycles, simply did what they were designed to do. Produce melatonin, shut down consciousness, rest deeply, heal completely, and wake naturally when morning light finally penetrated the cave. Not before, never before. Because darkness meant safety. Darkness meant sleep. Darkness meant home. You've probably never experienced that. That complete, nourishing, biologically appropriate darkness. But your body remembers it, craves it, still knows, on some cellular level, that this is how night should be. And maybe tonight, if you can find a way to make your bedroom darker, truly darker, you'll touch something your ancestors knew. That in darkness, there is rest. In darkness, there is peace. In darkness, there is the deepest sleep you've ever known. The midwinter mega sleep. Now we need to talk about something that might sound like fantasy. But it's not. It's biology. During the darkest, coldest months of Ice Age winter, roughly December through February in the Northern Hemisphere, your ancestors slept more. A lot more. We're talking 14 to 16 hours per day. Sometimes more during the absolute worst stretches. And this wasn't laziness or depression or giving up. It was survival strategy. Sophisticated, effective, biologically brilliant survival strategy. Because here's what happens when you sleep more. You burn fewer calories. Your metabolism slows. Your body temperature drops slightly. You need less food to survive. And in midwinter, when food was scarce and every calorie counted, sleeping became a way to stretch resources. It was like hibernation. Not true hibernation. Humans can't do that. But something close. A profound metabolic slowdown that allowed survival when conditions were harshest. Modern researchers call this winter dormancy or seasonal sleep variation, and evidence for it appears in multiple lines of inquiry. Archaeological sites show much less activity debris from midwinter months. Fewer tool-making remnants, less food waste, minimal evidence of movement or work, as if the population was resting. Anthropological studies of modern hunter-gatherers in extreme climates confirm the pattern. Groups in the Arctic, Siberia, and Patagonia naturally increase sleep duration in winter, sometimes dramatically. Not because they're told to, but because their bodies demand it. And there are physiological reasons this makes sense. When daylight shrinks to just 6 or 8 hours per day, melatonin production extends far beyond modern sleep schedules. Your body starts producing it at 4 p.m. and keeps producing it until 9 a.m. That's 17 hours of elevated melatonin. You can fight it with artificial light and willpower. But your ancestors didn't. They surrendered to it. Let the darkness pull them into extended rest. And their bodies responded by conserving energy at a level modern humans rarely experience. Heart rate dropped. Breathing slowed. Digestion became more efficient, extracting every possible calorie from limited food. Body temperature lowered by a degree or two, saving the enormous energy cost of heating a human body in sub-zero conditions. Historians still argue about the social implications of midwinter megasleep. Did entire tribes essentially hibernate together, with only minimal waking periods for basic needs? Or did some members maintain more normal schedules while others slept more? The evidence suggests it varied, but the general pattern holds. Winter meant more sleep, less activity, survival through rest. And here's an eccentric detail that archaeologists find fascinating. Some caves show evidence of extensive food preparation happening in late autumn. Massive quantities of meat being smoked, dried, or frozen. Fat being rendered and stored, like they were preparing for a period when they wouldn't be able to hunt or gather efficiently. Because they'd be sleeping. The midwinter megasleep had to be planned for. You couldn't just sleep 16 hours a day without ensuring you'd have food available during your brief waking periods. So there was preparation, strategy, collective understanding that winter survival meant sleeping more and eating less. And when the tribe did wake during those long winter days, activity was minimal. Tend the fire. Eat a small meal of stored food. Perhaps work on some quiet task, repairing tools, processing hides. Then back to sleep. No hunting in blizzards. No gathering in frozen landscapes. No unnecessary calorie expenditure. Just rest. Deep, restorative, calorie-conserving rest. The psychological effects must have been profound too. Winter depression, seasonal affective disorder, is real. Limited sunlight reduces serotonin production, increases melatonin, creates mood disturbances. But if you're sleeping most of the time, you're not awake to experience the depression. You're not conscious during the darkest, coldest, most psychologically challenging hours. You're simply absent, resting through the worst of it. And when you did wake, even briefly, you had the comfort of the tribe around you. Everyone in this together. Everyone sleeping, everyone conserving, everyone surviving the same way. Modern humans have completely lost this rhythm. We fight winter with the same activity levels as summer. Force ourselves to maintain productivity, work schedules, social obligations. Use artificial light to trick our bodies into thinking it's not really that dark. Consume stimulants to override the natural sleepiness that winter darkness brings. And we wonder why winter feels so hard. Why January and February drain us. Why we're tired all the time despite sleeping our normal 7 or 8 hours. Your ancestors would look at us and think, why are you fighting this? Why not just sleep? Your body is telling you to rest. The darkness is giving you permission. The cold is encouraging metabolic slowdown. Just sleep and save your energy for spring, when the days lengthen, when food becomes available again, when activity makes sense. But for now, rest. That was the wisdom of the midwinter megasleep. Not giving up, but giving in to biology, to season, to the simple truth that sometimes survival means closing your eyes and trusting that spring will come. It always had before. And while you slept deeply and long, your body did what it needed to do. Conserved, healed, waited, and survived. Children slept differently then. Let's talk about the smallest members of the tribe. The babies, toddlers, and children who experience sleep in ways that would make modern pediatricians either fascinated or concerned. Probably both, because Ice-Age children didn't have cribs, didn't have separate rooms, didn't have sleep training or schedules or any of the complex systems we've invented to manage childhood sleep. They just slept with everyone else, all the time, From birth until they were old enough to make their own sleeping arrangements, children were in constant physical contact with caregivers. Babies slept on mothers' chests or tucked against their bodies. Toddlers nestled between parents or older siblings. Young children found spots in the communal sleep pile where they fit naturally. No one was ever alone. No one was ever out of reach. No one ever cried in a dark room, wondering if anyone would come. This is called co-sleeping, and modern researchers have found it produces remarkable effects on child development. Better emotional regulation, more secure attachment, lower cortisol levels throughout life, easier transitions between sleep cycles. Your ancestors didn't know any of this science. They just knew that babies who slept close to their mothers thrived, and babies who were separated didn't. Natural selection had already run that experiment over millions of years. The answer was clear. Breastfeeding was seamless in this arrangement. A baby would stir, root around for food, nurse while the mother remained mostly asleep, then drift back down. No getting up, no walking to another room, no fully waking to feed. Just the gentle, half-conscious exchange that mammals have been doing since mammals existed. And a mother's sleep quality? Better than you'd think. Studies of co-sleeping mothers show they actually get more total sleep than mothers who practice separate sleeping, because they're not fully waking for nighttime feedings. Their sleep cycles synchronize with their babies. They enter lighter sleep stages when the baby is likely to wake, making the interaction less disruptive. Biology had engineered a system that worked. Children also benefited from temperature regulation. A baby sleeping alone in ice age conditions would die of hypothermia. No question. Their bodies can't generate enough heat to maintain core temperature in cold environments. But sleeping against an adult? Perfect. The adult's body is a furnace, maintaining the baby at ideal temperature without any conscious effort. And there's something else. Something subtle but profound. Children who co-sleep learn to regulate their breathing and heart rate by unconsciously matching the adults around them. This is called physiological synchrony, and it may reduce the risk of sleep-related infant deaths. The baby hears breathing, feels the chest rising and falling, and their own respiratory system entrains to that rhythm. It's like having a biological pacemaker, a safety system that prevents dangerous pauses or irregularities. Historians still argue about how long children co-slept with their families. Was there an age where they transitioned to more independent sleeping arrangements? The evidence is unclear, but anthropological studies of modern hunter-gatherers suggest that children often co-sleep until age 5, 6, or even older, not because of anxiety or attachment issues, but because that's just where children sleep, with the family, in the pile, safe. And here's an eccentric detail. Some caves show evidence of small alcoves or niches near main sleeping areas that appear sized for children. Were these special spots where older children could sleep semi-independently while still being close to the group? Little caves within the cave? It's possible, and it suggests a gradual transition rather than an abrupt separation. Children also learn sleep patterns from the tribe, watching adults prepare for sleep, participating in evening rituals, understanding that fire banking time meant sleep time. There was no confusion about bedtime, no negotiations or delays. When darkness came and the tribe settled, children settled too, because that's what everyone did. Sleep was modeled constantly, and children are excellent imitators. The security this created must have been profound. Imagine being a 3-year-old in the Ice Age. The world is dangerous, incomprehensible, filled with things that could hurt you. But every night, you're surrounded by the people who protect you. Close enough to touch. Close enough to hear breathing. Close enough that if you wake frightened, a hand is already there. You never experience the terror of abandonment. Never feel the panic of darkness and isolation. Your nervous system learns early. Night is safe. Sleep is safe. The tribe is here. And that foundation of security laid down in the first years of life probably affected everything else. How you handled stress as an adult. How deeply you could rest. How much you trusted the world. Modern developmental psychology is just now understanding how crucial those early sleep experiences are. And they're finding that separate sleep, babies in cribs, children in their own rooms, may have developmental costs we haven't fully reckoned with. Your ancestors never had to reckon with them because they never separated children, never made sleep a solitary experience, never asked a tiny human to feel safe alone in the dark. They knew better, or rather, they didn't know anything else. And because they didn't, children slept deeply, securely, without the anxiety that haunts so many modern childhoods, just surrounded by warmth and breathing and the absolute certainty that they belonged. Right there, in the pile. Always. The dream life of hunter-gatherers. Now let's talk about what happened when your ancestors closed their eyes and drifted past consciousness. Because they dreamed, vividly, intensely, more richly than you probably do. And those dreams mattered in ways that modern people have mostly forgotten. Your ancestors had more REM sleep than you do. Those complete, uninterrupted sleep cycles we talked about, they allowed REM stages to extend fully, sometimes lasting 30 or 40 minutes instead of the 10 to 20 minutes most modern people experience. More REM meant more dreaming, more detailed, narrative, emotionally powerful dreams. And without the cognitive clutter of modern life, emails, advertisements, news, social media, the constant information overload, their dreams had clear material to work with. Memories of the hunt, observations of animal behavior, concerns about weather or food, relationships within the tribe, the landscape around them. Their dreams processed this information, creating connections, solving problems, preparing for future challenges. Modern neuroscience has confirmed that REM sleep is when the brain consolidates memories, processes emotions, and runs simulations of possible scenarios. Your ancestors' brains were doing this too, but with more time, more depth, and more relevance to immediate survival. And here's where it gets really interesting. They believed their dreams meant something. Not just random neural firing, not just your brain taking out the trash, but messages, visions, communication from the spirit world or the ancestors or the animals themselves. Anthropological studies of modern hunter-gatherers show that dreams are taken extremely seriously. A dream about a successful hunt location is followed. A dream warning of danger is heeded. A dream featuring a deceased elder is considered actual contact with that person. Your Ice Age ancestors almost certainly operated the same way. Archaeological evidence hints at this. Cave paintings that seem to depict dream imagery, human-animal hybrids, floating figures, impossible scenes. Burial practices that suggest beliefs about dream souls leaving the body during sleep. Artifacts that might have been dream totems or objects to influence what you dreamed about. They lived in a world where the boundary between waking and dreaming was more permeable than ours, where both states had validity, where information from dreams could save your life or improve your circumstances just as surely as information from waking observations. Historians still argue about how sophisticated their dream interpretation was. Did they have dream specialists, shamans, or elders who helped interpret complex or disturbing dreams? We don't know for certain, but given the complexity of their other cultural practices, it seems likely. And there's something else. Your ancestors probably experienced more lucid dreams than modern people do. Lucid dreaming, becoming aware you're dreaming while still in the dream, happens more frequently in people with stable circadian rhythms, good sleep hygiene, and extended REM periods, all of which your ancestors had. There are reports from modern hunter-gatherers of deliberate dream control, choosing to revisit dream locations, seeking specific dream teachers or guides, using dreams as a practice ground for skills or problem solving. Your ancestors may have been doing the same thing, using their rich dream life as an extension of waking life, a place to learn, explore, and prepare. And here's an eccentric detail. Some evidence suggests that Ice Age people may have practiced group dream sharing, morning conversations where dreams were recounted and discussed communally, where patterns were noticed, where multiple people dreaming similar things was taken as especially significant. Imagine waking in the cave as dawn light began to filter in, the fire being built back up, A simple morning meal being prepared, and people casually sharing, "I dreamed of the river bend where the willows grow. The reindeer were there." Someone else, "I dreamed of reindeer too, but they were moving south." A third, "My dream showed snow coming soon." 3 days. And the tribe, collectively, using this dream information to plan their day. Where to hunt, what to prepare for, how to interpret signs they'd see while awake. Not because dreams were magic, but because dreams were their brains processing real information in ways that conscious thought sometimes couldn't. Noticing patterns, making connections, preparing for contingencies. Modern science is just now validating what your ancestors knew. Dreams serve critical functions. They regulate emotions, consolidate learning, enhance creativity, and help us simulate and prepare for future challenges. Your ancestors took full advantage of this. They honored their dreams, remembered them, used them, while modern people often dismiss dreams as nonsense or forget them within minutes of waking. We've lost something there. Not just the content of dreams, but the wisdom that comes from paying attention to what our sleeping minds are trying to tell us. Your ancestors knew better. Every morning, they woke with messages from the night. Some trivial, some profound, all worth considering. And they moved through their day, informed by both their waking observations and their sleeping visions. Whole people, integrated across all states of consciousness, not split between real waking life and meaningless dreams, but unified, complete, and probably, as a result, more in touch with themselves and their world than most modern people ever managed to be. Because they listened to their dreams, to their deeper selves, to the wisdom that only emerges when consciousness releases its grip and lets the mind roam free through the darkness. And what they found there helped them survive, helped them thrive, helped them sleep deeply, knowing that even in dreams, they were learning, growing, preparing for whatever tomorrow would bring. Stress without cortisol chaos. Here's something that might seem contradictory at first. Your ancestors lived more dangerous lives than you do. Objectively, measurably more dangerous. Predators, starvation, injuries without medical care, infections without antibiotics, weather that could kill. The threats were real, immediate, and yet, they probably slept better than you do. How is that possible? How can someone facing genuine life-and-death situations rest more deeply than someone worrying about a work presentation or whether they sent the right text message? The answer lies in the nature of stress itself and how our bodies are designed to handle it. Your ancestors experienced what scientists call acute stress, immediate threats that required immediate responses. A predator appears, fight or flee. Food runs out, hunt or gather. Injury occurs, treat it or die. The stress response would spike, adrenaline, cortisol, heightened alertness. But then it would resolve. Either the threat was handled or it wasn't. Either you survived or you didn't. There was no ambiguity, no endless what-if scenarios playing out in your head. Once the danger passed, the stress hormones cleared from your system, usually within hours, sometimes within minutes, and your body returned to baseline, ready to rest, ready to sleep. Compare this to modern stress. Chronic, ongoing, never quite resolving. Your job might be stressful, but you can't solve it with a spear. Your financial worries won't be eliminated by running away. Your social anxieties can't be addressed by climbing a tree. So your stress response activates and stays activated. Low-grade cortisol elevation that lasts weeks, months, years. Your body in a constant state of alert for threats that never quite materialize but also never quite disappear. This is cortisol chaos, and it destroys sleep. Because when cortisol is elevated, melatonin production is suppressed. When your nervous system thinks there's a threat, it won't let you fully rest. You get fragmented sleep, shallow sleep, sleep that never quite reaches the deepest, most restorative stages. Because your brain is saying, we're not safe yet. Stay alert, even when you're objectively safer than any human has ever been. Your ancestors didn't have this problem. When they returned to the cave after a successful hunt, the stress was over. Food secured, threat resolved. When they evaded a predator, the stress was over. Danger avoided, threat resolved. When they survived a storm, the stress was over. Weather passed, threat resolved. And with the threat resolved, their cortisol levels could drop. Their nervous systems could stand down. And sleep could come naturally, deeply, without the nagging sense that something's still wrong, but you can't quite identify what. Historians still argue about whether Ice Age humans experienced anticipatory anxiety the way modern people do. Could they worry about future hunts failing? Could they stress about winter coming? Probably, to some degree. But without the cognitive capacity for complex future planning that civilization has developed, that anxiety was likely much more limited. You can't worry about retirement if you don't have the concept. You can't stress about career advancement if careers don't exist. You can't doom scroll about global problems if you don't know there's a globe. Your concerns are immediate, concrete, and solvable. Or they kill you, which also resolves them. Either way, resolution happens. And there's something else, physical exhaustion. Your ancestors were tired in a way modern people rarely experience. Bone-deep physical fatigue from walking miles every day, from hunting, from carrying, from the constant physical demands of survival. This kind of tiredness overrides stress. Your body says, I don't care if you're worried. I need to recover. Sleep. Now. And you do. Modern people are mentally exhausted, but physically underutilized. We're stressed, but not tired in the right way. So our minds race while our bodies are restless, and sleep becomes this elusive thing we chase instead of something that simply claims us. And here's an eccentric detail. Some research suggests that modern people actually produce more total stress hormones over a lifetime than Ice Age humans did, despite living safer lives. Because acute stress, even when intense, is self-limiting. Chronic stress is not. The caveman who faced a cave lion got a massive cortisol spike for 20 minutes. Then it was over. You facing your inbox gets smaller cortisol elevations that last all day, every day, for years. Which is worse for sleep? The brief spike that clears completely, or the constant drip that never stops? Your body was designed for the spike. It handles that well. The constant drip is what's killing your sleep. Your ancestors had real reasons to be stressed, but those reasons had endpoints. Your stress has no endpoint, and that's why, paradoxically, they slept better despite facing more danger. Because danger has resolution. Chronic anxiety does not. And sleep demands that your nervous system believe, at least temporarily, that everything is resolved. That you're safe. That you can let go. Your ancestors could genuinely feel that at the end of the day. They'd survived. They were safe. Tomorrow's threats would come tomorrow. But tonight they could rest. Can you say the same? Or does tomorrow's stress bleed into tonight? Does next week's worry contaminate right now? Does the endless, unresolvable nature of modern life keep your cortisol elevated even as you lie in perfect safety? Your ancestors would find this tragic. All this safety, all this comfort, wasted on people who can't stop worrying long enough to actually rest. Maybe there's something to learn there. About resolving what can be resolved. About accepting what can't. About trusting that tomorrow's problems can wait until tomorrow. About claiming tonight as a sanctuary, where stress ends, where worry ceases, where sleep, finally, is allowed to happen. The moon's forgotten influence. Look up at the moon tonight if you can. That pale disk that's been hanging in Earth's sky for 4.5 billion years. Your ancestors looked at it too, but they didn't just admire it. They lived by it. Their sleep was governed by its cycles in ways that modern people have almost completely forgotten. Because before artificial light, the moon wasn't just a romantic feature of the night sky. It was a biological regulator, a timer, a force that shaped human behavior as surely as the sun did. The lunar cycle is 29.5 days, from new moon to full moon and back again. And your ancestors' sleep patterns shifted across that cycle. On new moon nights, when the sky was at its darkest, they slept deeper, longer, more completely, because the darkness was absolute. No moonlight penetrating the cave. No silvery glow to suppress melatonin production. Just pure blackness that allowed maximum rest. But on full moon nights, things changed. The landscape outside flooded with light bright enough to see by. Shadows sharpened, details emerged, and humans naturally slept lighter, less, more wakefully. Modern sleep studies have confirmed this isn't just cultural or learned. It's biological. Even people sleeping in completely dark rooms with no awareness of the moon phase show measurable changes in sleep architecture across the lunar cycle. Less REM sleep during full moons. More nighttime awakenings. Longer sleep latency, the time it takes to fall asleep. Your brain knows what the moon is doing, even when you can't see it. Because for millions of years, moon phases mattered. Full moon nights were opportunities. You could travel after dark, work on tasks that required vision, keep better watch for predators, or be watched by them. Your ancestors likely used full moon nights for activities that darkness normally prevented. Extended evening conversations, tool making by moonlight, even night hunting for those brave or desperate enough. The tribe would naturally sleep later, wake earlier, be more active during the bright night. And their bodies supported this with adjusted hormone production. Less melatonin during full moons. More cortisol remaining active into evening hours. A metabolic shift toward alertness rather than rest. Then as the moon waned, sleep would gradually deepen again. Bodies recalibrating toward rest as darkness returned. By the time the new moon arrived, maximum sleep was possible again, and the cycle would begin anew. Historians still argue about whether Ice Age humans consciously tracked lunar cycles for planning purposes. The answer is almost certainly yes. Archaeological evidence shows awareness of moon phases going back at least 30,000 years. Carved bones with 29 or 30 marks. Cave paintings with lunar symbolism. Burial practices aligned with specific moon phases. They knew, and they used that knowledge. Women's menstrual cycles, also roughly 29 days, may have been synchronized with lunar cycles in ways that modern life has disrupted. Many modern hunter-gatherer groups show menstrual synchrony with moon phases. Ovulation during full moons. Menstruation during new moons. This would have had profound implications for tribal life, including sleep patterns. And there's an eccentric detail that scientists find fascinating. Some evidence suggests that lunar cycles affected not just when people slept, but how they dreamed. Full moon periods associated with more vivid, often unsettling dreams. New moon periods with deeper, more peaceful sleep and fewer remembered dreams. Was this purely biological? Or did cultural beliefs about moon power influence the experience? Probably both, reinforcing each other. Modern people have lost this rhythm almost entirely. We sleep, or try to, the same way every night regardless of moon phase. We use artificial light that drowns out lunar influence. We take medications that override natural hormonal shifts. We've disconnected from a cycle that regulated human sleep for hundreds of thousands of years. And maybe that's part of why sleep feels so hard now. We're trying to impose rigid consistency on a system that evolved for flexibility, for variation, for rhythms that shift with the moon. Your ancestors didn't fight the moon. They flowed with it, slept deeply when the moon allowed deep sleep, slept lightly when the moon encouraged wakefulness, and trusted that over the course of a lunar cycle, everything would balance out. Some nights of profound rest, some nights of lighter, more wakeful sleep. All of it normal, all of it right. Not a sleep disorder to be fixed, but a natural pattern to be honored. The moon is still up there, still cycling through its phases, still pulling at tides and biological rhythms. Your body still knows it's there, still responds to it, however faintly. But you've probably stopped paying attention, stopped allowing the variation, stopped trusting that some nights are meant for deep sleep and some nights for lighter rest, and that's okay. Your ancestors knew. They looked up at the moon and understood. Tonight's sleep would be different from last night's. And that wasn't a problem. It was just the way things were. The way things were always meant to be. Waking in the night was normal. Here's something that might change your entire relationship with sleep. If you wake up in the middle of the night, you're not broken. You don't have insomnia. You're not failing at sleep. You're doing exactly what humans did for hundreds of thousands of years. Because your ancestors didn't sleep in one continuous 8-hour block. They slept in 2 phases, with a period of quiet wakefulness in between. This is called biphasic sleep or segmented sleep, and it was normal, universal, even, for most of human history. Here's how it worked. Your tribe would go to sleep shortly after dark. First sleep would last about 4 hours. Deep, restorative, heavy sleep. Then, around midnight or 1 a.m., people would naturally wake. Not jolted awake, not anxious or alarmed. Just awake, gently surfacing from sleep because that's what bodies did. And they'd stay awake for an hour or 2, in the darkness, doing quiet things, tending the fire, talking softly with others who were also awake, praying or meditating or just lying there thinking. Sometimes making love. Historical record from later periods suggests that the period between first and second sleep was a common time for intimacy. Reflecting on dreams, checking on children, just being awake, without anxiety, without the sense that something was wrong. Because nothing was wrong. This was first watch, but internalized. A natural breaking point in the night. Then after an hour or 2, drowsiness would return. Second sleep would begin, usually lighter than first sleep, with more REM activity and dreams, lasting until dawn or shortly before. And then morning would arrive. Total sleep time across both phases was probably 8 to 10 hours, depending on season. But it wasn't continuous, and it didn't need to be. Historians discovered this pattern by accident while studying medieval and early modern European texts. References to first sleep and second sleep appeared everywhere. In literature, in legal documents, in diaries. People casually mentioning waking between sleeps to do various tasks. It was so common that it didn't even require explanation. Of course you woke between first and second sleep. Everyone did. Then researchers started looking at anthropological data from modern hunter-gatherer groups living without electricity. The pattern appeared there too. Not universal in every group, but common enough to suggest it's a natural human sleep architecture. Your body wants to do this. It's trying to do this. But modern life fights it. We've been taught that sleeping through the night is the goal. That waking up means something's wrong. That you should feel guilty or anxious if you're awake at 2 a.m. So when you naturally wake between sleep phases, you panic. You check the clock and calculate how many hours you have left. You worry that you won't fall back asleep. You think about taking medication or getting up or why your sleep is broken. And that anxiety, that resistance to the natural pattern, actually creates the insomnia you're afraid of. Your cortisol spikes. Your mind races. Sleep becomes impossible to reclaim. Not because biphasic sleep is a problem, but because you've been taught to treat it as one. Your ancestors didn't have this problem. They woke between sleeps and thought, this is the quiet time. Not, oh no, I'm awake and I shouldn't be. They used the time peacefully, then returned to sleep naturally. No struggle, no anxiety, just the rhythm their bodies were designed for. And there's something profound about that quiet middle-of-the-night waking period. Historians and psychologists believe it may have served important psychological functions. Time for reflection without the distractions of day. Processing of emotions or problems in a liminal state between sleep and waking. A uniquely quiet, contemplative space that modern life has eliminated. Some researchers argue that many modern cases of insomnia are actually just people experiencing natural biphasic sleep patterns in a culture that doesn't recognize or accommodate them. You wake at 2 a.m. not because something's wrong, but because your biology is doing what it's supposed to do. And if you could just accept it, lie there peacefully instead of anxiously. Maybe read something calming by very dim light. Maybe meditate or pray or just breathe. Maybe have a quiet conversation with a partner. Then trust that second sleep will come when it's ready. You might find that insomnia disappears. Because it was never insomnia. It was just an ancient pattern expressing itself in a modern world that doesn't understand it. Your ancestors knew about this middle time, valued it even. The quiet hour when the world slept, but you were gently conscious. Aware of the darkness, the fire's glow, the breathing of your tribe. Aware of yourself in a way that daylight doesn't permit. Aware of the night as a companion, not an enemy. And then, when second sleep came, it took you gently, back down into dreams, into restoration, into the rest that would carry you to morning. Complete, satisfied, having done exactly what human sleep is meant to do. Not fighting the pattern, but flowing with it, as people did for hundreds of thousands of years before someone decided that 8 continuous hours was the only acceptable way. Your body knows better. It's been trying to tell you. Maybe tonight, if you wake in the darkness between sleeps, you'll listen. And instead of panicking, you'll think, first sleep is done. Second sleep will come soon. And maybe, just maybe it will. Smoke, scent, and slumber. Let's talk about what your ancestors smelled as they drifted off to sleep. Because the air in an ice age cave wasn't neutral or sterile. It was rich with scent, complex, layered, and those smells affected sleep in ways we're only beginning to understand. First and most obvious, would smoke. Constant, pervasive, the smell that defined human shelter for hundreds of thousands of years. Different woods produced different smokes. Pine and cedar, sharp, resinous, almost medicinal. Oak and maple, sweet, mellow, less intrusive. Birch, clean with hints of wintergreen. Juniper, fresh and aromatic. Your ancestors learned which woods burned cleanest, which produced the least irritating smoke, which created the most pleasant atmosphere for sleeping. And here's what modern science has discovered. Many wood smokes contain compounds that affect human physiology. Terpenes from coniferous woods have mild sedative properties. Certain aromatics can reduce anxiety and lower blood pressure. Even the particulates in smoke, at low concentrations, may trigger biological responses that promote rest. Your ancestors were conducting aromatherapy every night, without knowing it, just by burning the right wood in the right way. But smoke wasn't the only scent. There was earth, the smell of stone and soil, and the minerals that composed the cave itself. Some caves had particularly pleasant mineral scents, calcite, limestone, certain clays that released subtle aromatics. Your ancestors probably preferred these caves when they had choices, not just for practical reasons, but because they smelled right, because sleeping there felt good in ways they couldn't articulate. Animal furs carried their own scents. Even well-processed hides retained the smell of the animal they came from. Deer and elk, musky but not unpleasant. Bear, stronger, more pronounced. Rabbit, barely noticeable. These scents surrounded sleepers, wrapped them, became associated with safety and rest. Your brain learns associations. If you always smell pine smoke and deer hide when you sleep, eventually those scents alone trigger drowsiness. Classical conditioning applied to rest. Your ancestors' sleep became neurologically linked to the smells of their sleeping environment. And there were human smells too. Let's be honest about this. 10 or 20 people living in close quarters, bathing infrequently, if at all, during winter, working hard, eating meat. There were body odors. But here's the thing. Familiar scents, even ones that seem unpleasant in isolation, can be comforting when associated with safety and tribe. The smell of your family, your group, the people who keep you alive. That smell means home, means belonging, means you're not alone. Modern people are often disgusted by the idea of body odor, but your ancestors' brains processed it differently, not as something to eliminate, but as information, as connection, as proof of presence. And historians have found evidence that Ice Age peoples used aromatic plants deliberately in sleeping areas. Dried herbs scattered in bedding, aromatic wood chips mixed with moss, even flowers during brief summer months. Lavender's wild ancestors, native to some Ice Age regions, have sedative properties. Chamomile grows wild across much of Europe and Asia. Sage, thyme, sweetgrass, all have scents that affect mood and alertness. Were these choices deliberate? Did your ancestors know these plants helped sleep? Or did they just prefer how they smelled and the sleep benefits were accidental? We'll never know for certain. But the pattern appears too often to be coincidence. Someone figured out that sleeping on sage-scented bedding led to better rest. And that knowledge spread, generation to generation, tribe to tribe. Practical wisdom about smell and sleep. There's an eccentric detail that archaeologists love. Some caves show evidence of specific areas being kept cleaner than others. Sleeping zones with less debris, less accumulation, better maintenance. This might have been partly about scent control, keeping sleeping areas fresher, reducing unpleasant odors from food waste or refuse, creating an environment where rest came easier. Your nose knows more than you think. Scent bypasses the rational brain and goes straight to the limbic system, the ancient emotional center. A smell can trigger memories, emotions, physiological responses before you consciously register what you're smelling. Your ancestors understood this instinctively. They curated the scent environment of their sleeping spaces. Not perfectly, not like modern aromatherapy with essential oils and diffusers, but effectively, using what they had to create an olfactory atmosphere that supported rest. Compare this to modern bedrooms, often odorless by design, aggressively cleaned of any scent, or worse, filled with synthetic fragrances from laundry detergent, fabric softener, air fresheners, chemical smells that your brain doesn't recognize, that might trigger subtle stress responses, that certainly don't carry the associations of safety and home that natural scents would have. Maybe we've lost something there. Maybe the neutral, sterile smell of modern sleeping spaces is part of why sleep feels disconnected, ungrounded, not rooted in the deep associations that would tell your primitive brain, this is where we rest. Your ancestors knew what sleep smelled like. Wood smoke and stone and fir and tribe, sage and moss and the mineral scent of clean earth. The particular combination that meant home. That meant safety. That meant you could close your eyes and let go. Because your nose had already told your brain, you're where you belong. And maybe, just maybe, that helped them sleep better than we do. Not despite the smells, but because of them. The mammoth hunt hangover. Now let's talk about the deepest sleep your ancestors ever experienced. The kind of rest that comes after days of extreme physical exertion. The kind you've probably never felt in your entire life. Because you've never hunted a mammoth. And neither have I. But your ancestors did. And when they returned, if they returned, they slept in ways that defy modern understanding of what sleep can be. A mammoth hunt wasn't a few hours of activity. It was days, sometimes a week or more. Tracking a herd across frozen tundra. Walking 20, 30, 40 miles per day. In cold that could kill you if you stopped moving. Carrying weapons, supplies, everything you'd need. Then the hunt itself. The coordinated attack. The danger. Mammoths could kill you with a single swipe of their tusks. The adrenaline. The physical effort of bringing down an animal that weighed 6 tons. Then the butchering. Hours of cutting, hauling, processing. Carrying hundreds of pounds of meat and hide back to the cave. Sometimes making multiple trips. Your muscles burning. Your body running on fumes. Your energy reserves completely depleted. And when you finally made it back to the cave, when the meat was secured, the tribe fed, the immediate survival crisis resolved, you collapsed. Not metaphorically. Literally collapsed in a sleep so deep that nothing short of a predator attack would wake you. Modern sleep science calls this recovery sleep or rebound sleep. Your body goes into emergency restoration mode. Sleep becomes not just rest, but active healing. Your muscles are full of micro tears that need repair. Your glycogen stores are empty and need replenishing. Your hormones are chaotic and need rebalancing. Your immune system is compromised from stress and needs rebuilding. And sleep, deep, uninterrupted, extended sleep, is how all of that happens. Your ancestors might sleep 16, 18, even 20 hours after returning from a major hunt. Not in one continuous block, necessarily, but close. Waking briefly to eat, drink, relieve themselves, then immediately falling back into unconsciousness. Their bodies demanding rest, and getting it, without guilt, without the sense that they should be productive, without anyone suggesting they were lazy or wasting time. Because everyone understood, this was necessary, this was earned, this was the body taking what it needed to survive. And historians find evidence of this pattern in archaeological sites. Periods of intense activity, tools being made, food being processed, high energy expenditure, followed by periods of apparent inactivity, where almost nothing happens for days, as if the entire tribe was resting, recovering, sleeping off the mammoth hunt hangover. The physical exhaustion your ancestors experienced regularly created a kind of sleep that modern people rarely achieve. Because modern exhaustion is usually mental, not physical. You're tired from thinking, from stress, from information overload. But your body hasn't actually done much. You haven't walked 20 miles, haven't lifted 200 pounds repeatedly, haven't pushed your cardiovascular system to its limits. So when you lie down, your body isn't screaming for recovery the way your ancestors' bodies were. Your mind might be exhausted, but your muscles are restless, and deep sleep becomes elusive. Your ancestors didn't have this problem. After a major hunt, their bodies overrode everything. No lying awake thinking, no tossing and turning, no shallow sleep or frequent waking. Just a profound unconsciousness that comes when your body has used every resource and needs to rebuild. Sleep so deep that dreams barely registered, so complete that time became irrelevant. You went down into darkness and emerged hours or days later feeling restored. Not completely, recovery took time, but fundamentally repaired, ready to function again. And there's something about knowing you've earned that rest, that you've pushed your body to its limits, and now you're giving it what it needs. There's no guilt, no anxiety, no sense that you should be doing something else. Just the satisfaction of lying down after genuine exertion, of feeling your muscles relax, of letting exhaustion pull you under like a tide. Modern people sometimes chase this feeling with extreme exercise. Marathons, ultra-endurance events, brutal gym sessions. Try to create the physical exhaustion that leads to that quality of sleep. And sometimes it works. Athletes often report the best sleep of their lives during heavy training because they're doing what human bodies were designed to do, working hard, then resting completely. But for most people, most of the time, that level of physical demand doesn't exist. We've engineered it out of daily life, which might be more comfortable. But it also means we've lost access to the deepest, most restorative sleep humans are capable of achieving. The mammoth hunt hangover sleep. The sleep that comes when you've given everything. The sleep that rebuilds you from the cellular level up. Your ancestors knew this sleep intimately, felt it regularly, depended on it for survival. And while you can't hunt mammoths anymore, maybe there's still something to learn about moving your body hard enough that rest becomes inevitable, about earning sleep through exertion rather than just hoping it arrives, about trusting that when you've truly depleted yourself, sleep will come. Deep, complete, undeniable. The way it did for your ancestors after they brought home food for the entire tribe and slept like the dead because their bodies demanded it, and they had the wisdom to surrender. Completely. Women's sleep in the Stone Age. We need to talk about something that often gets overlooked in discussions of ancient life. Half the population, half the story. Women's sleep in the Ice Age was different from men's sleep. Not worse or better necessarily, just different. Shaped by biology, by tribal roles, by the demands of pregnancy and nursing and caregiving. And understanding those differences reveals something important about human sleep architecture. Let's start with the most obvious, pregnancy. Ice Age women were pregnant frequently, not continuously. There's evidence that breastfeeding and nutritional factors created natural spacing between births, but probably pregnant or nursing for the majority of their adult lives. And pregnancy changes sleep dramatically. First trimester, profound fatigue. Your body is building another human at the cellular level, which requires enormous energy. Sleep becomes almost compulsive. Ice Age women probably slept more during early pregnancy simply because their bodies demanded it. And the tribe, understanding this pattern, likely accommodated it. Gave pregnant women the best sleeping spots. Allowed them to rest more. Recognized that growing the next generation required resources, including sleep. Second trimester, often better sleep. The initial hormonal chaos settles somewhat. Energy returns. Women might have been more active during this period. Third trimester, Terrible sleep by modern standards, but possibly better in Ice Age contexts. Here's why. Modern pregnant women sleep on mattresses that don't accommodate their changing bodies well. But an Ice Age woman sleeping on moldable furs and moss, she could arrange her bedding to support her belly, could shift and adjust constantly, could sleep in positions that modern mattresses don't easily allow. And she was surrounded by other women who had been through it, who knew what helped, who would adjust her sleeping arrangement, bring her water in the night, support her in ways that modern pregnant women sleeping alone in bedrooms don't have access to. Then came birth, which often happened at night. Interestingly, labor tends to begin in evening hours when melatonin and oxytocin levels rise. Your ancestors probably gave birth in the sleeping area of the cave, surrounded by firelight and other women, then immediately returned to that same spot to rest, the newborn against her chest. Sleep coming in fragments between feedings, but sleep nonetheless. And here's something historians find fascinating. New mothers in Ice Age tribes probably slept better than modern new mothers in many ways. Because they weren't alone. Other women helped with the baby, took turns holding the infant so the mother could sleep more deeply, brought food, tended the fire, managed everything so the new mother could focus on feeding and resting. It takes a village isn't just a saying. It's survival strategy, and it applied to sleep as much as anything else. Nursing created its own sleep patterns. Frequent waking to feed, every 2 to 3 hours for newborns. But because the baby slept against the mother, these feedings were brief and minimally disruptive. Roll slightly, latch the baby, drift back to sleep while nursing. No getting up, no walking to another room, no fully waking. The biological synchrony between mother and infant meant their sleep cycles aligned. Light sleep when the baby was likely to wake. Deeper sleep when the baby slept deeply. A dance choreographed by millions of years of evolution. And as children grew, mother's sleep gradually normalized. Fewer night wakings, longer stretches of rest, until the next pregnancy began the cycle again. But there's something else about women's sleep that's often overlooked. Menstruation. In modern life, it's mostly an inconvenience. But in Ice Age life, it had sleep implications. Blood loss creates fatigue. Iron depletion affects energy levels. Women likely slept more during menstruation. And again, the tribe probably accommodated this. Gave menstruating women lighter duties. Allowed extra rest. Recognized that biological processes required resources. There's also evidence that women in close living groups, like an Ice Age tribe, often experience menstrual synchrony, cycles aligning over time, which might mean that multiple women would be in the same phase simultaneously, resting together, supporting each other, creating a rhythm where the whole tribe adjusted to accommodate women's biological cycles, not seeing it as weakness, but as normal variation in human functioning. Historians still argue about whether women had specific sleeping areas or always integrated with a general tribal sleeping arrangement. The evidence is mixed, but it's likely that pregnant women, new mothers, and menstruating women sometimes created subgroups within a larger sleeping pile, clustered together for mutual support, while still remaining part of the whole. And there's an eccentric detail. Some caves show evidence of particularly well-maintained, comfortable sleeping spots that appear to have been used primarily by women. The best furs, the most sheltered locations, the areas with optimal temperature. Was this preferential treatment recognizing that women's reproductive role required extra care? Or just practical acknowledgement that pregnant and nursing women needed better sleep conditions? Probably both. And here's what modern sleep science is discovering. Women's sleep is more disrupted by environmental factors than men's sleep, more sensitive to temperature, light, noise, and comfort. This might not be a bug. It might be a feature, because for hundreds of thousands of years, women needed to wake easily when infants cried, needed to be alert to children's needs, needed to sleep lightly enough to respond, but deeply enough to restore. Your female ancestors perfected this balance, sleeping in ways that modern women often can't, because modern life lacks the support structures that made it work. The other women who helped, the communal sleeping that allowed rest while remaining vigilant, The tribal understanding that women's sleep was different and that was okay. That accommodations weren't weakness. They were wisdom. Your female ancestors slept differently than the men, but they slept deeply enough to survive, to thrive, to raise children who would carry humanity forward. And maybe we should remember that, honor that, recognize that women's sleep has always required support, community, understanding, not just individually trying harder, but collectively creating the conditions where rest becomes possible, the way they did, for hundreds of thousands of years. Elder wisdom in the watch. Let's talk about the oldest members of the tribe, the grandmothers and grandfathers who had survived decades in the Ice Age, who had seen more winters than most people would ever experience, whose sleep had changed in ways that might surprise you. Because elders didn't sleep the same way younger adults did. They couldn't. Their bodies wouldn't allow it. And that wasn't a problem. It was a feature. As people age, sleep architecture changes naturally. Less deep sleep, more frequent wakings, earlier rising, lighter overall rest. Modern medicine often treats this as a disorder. Insomnia in the elderly, sleep disruption, problems to be medicated. But your Ice Age ancestors saw it differently. Because elders who slept lightly were valuable. They were the natural night watch. The ones who woke easily when something was wrong. Who heard the unusual sound, noticed the shift in fire quality, sensed danger before it fully materialized. Their broken sleep was actually tribal insurance. While young adults and children slept deeply, as they needed to for growth and recovery, elders maintained a lighter vigilance, not consciously staying awake, but naturally surfacing from sleep more frequently, checking the cave entrance, listening to the night, tending the fire without being asked, then drifting back down. This pattern repeated through the night, and the tribe was safer for it. Historians still argue whether this role was formally recognized or just naturally emerged from age-related sleep changes. But archaeological evidence suggests elders were valued members positioned strategically in sleeping arrangements, often near entrances or perimeter positions, where their lighter sleep and frequent waking would be most useful. And here's something that modern gerontology is just discovering. Elders' sleep, while lighter and more fragmented, can still be restorative, if it's accepted rather than fought. If the person doesn't lie awake, anxiously worrying about why they're awake. If those wakeful periods are used peacefully, tending fire, watching, thinking, rather than treated as failures. Your elder ancestors probably felt no anxiety about their sleep patterns. They woke because that's what old bodies did. They used the waking time usefully. They drifted back to sleep when ready. Total sleep time might have been 7 or 8 hours, but spread across the night with many brief wakings. And that was fine. More than fine. It was how they contributed even when they could no longer hunt or gather as actively. There's also evidence that elders served as dream interpreters and wisdom keepers during those wakeful night hours. Someone wakes from a troubling dream. An elder is already awake, ready to listen, to offer perspective. A child cries out in the night. An elder is there before the parents fully wake, soothing, comforting. The fire needs attention. An elder has already noticed, already adjusted it. They were the night stewards of a tribe, and their lighter sleep made that possible. And there's something else. Elders who couldn't contribute physically during the day could still contribute through their wakefulness at night. Status didn't depend solely on hunting or gathering. It came from being useful in whatever way your body allowed. And nighttime vigilance was useful, valued, respected. This created a different relationship with aging and sleep. No shame about sleeping differently. No anxiety about not sleeping well by young adult standards. Just recognition that your sleep evolved as you did. And that evolution served the tribe. Some archaeological sites show evidence of particularly comfortable sleeping spots positioned near cave entrances, well padded with furs, close to fire for warmth, but also close to the opening where threats would first appear. These might have been elder sleeping positions, comfortable enough for their aging bodies, positioned where their light sleep served as early warning system. Historians also find evidence that elders often slept less in total than younger adults. maybe 6 hours instead of 8 or 9. And this wasn't sleep deprivation. It was sufficient rest for bodies that weren't growing, weren't recovering from intense physical labor, weren't burning the calories that youth required. Elders needed less sleep, and they got exactly what they needed, without guilt or medication or the sense that something was wrong. There's an eccentric detail that researchers love. Some evidence suggests that elders in Ice Age tribes practiced what we now call strategic napping. Light sleep during the day when they could afford it, supplementing their lighter night sleep with brief rest periods when the opportunity arose. Not seen as laziness, but as wisdom, taking rest when available because night might bring duties. And here's what modern society has lost: the understanding that elder sleep is different, and that's not just okay. It's valuable. We medicate older people, trying to force them to sleep like young people. We worry when grandparents are awake at 3 a.m. We treat age-appropriate sleep changes as pathology. But your ancestors knew better. They recognized that sleep evolved across a lifetime. That elders sleeping lightly and waking frequently was part of the tribal ecosystem. That those wakeful hours had purpose. And that accepting your sleep as it was, rather than fighting it, was the path to actual rest. Your elder ancestors didn't lie awake frustrated that they couldn't sleep like they did at 20. They accepted what their bodies offered, used it productively, served their tribe through their wakefulness, and found peace in that. The peace that comes from being useful, from being valued, from knowing that even your broken sleep was actually a contribution, that you were watching over the tribe, even as they slept, especially as they slept. And in that role, there was rest. Maybe not the rest of youth, but the rest of wisdom, the rest of acceptance, the rest that says, I am exactly as I should be. And that is enough. Ice Age insomnia did exist. We need to talk about something that complicates the narrative, because it would be easy to romanticize Ice Age sleep, to pretend everyone slept perfectly, that natural living solved all problems. But that's not true. Your ancestors had insomnia too. Not everyone, not even most people, but some. There were individuals who couldn't sleep while even in optimal conditions, who lay awake while the tribe slept around them, who struggled with rest despite physical exhaustion, despite darkness, despite safety. Insomnia isn't entirely modern. It's part of the human variation, and your ancestors dealt with it. Archaeological evidence hints at this in subtle ways. Activity debris from nighttime hours that can't be explained by routine watch duties. Tool-making debris that suggests someone was working when others slept, where patterns in specific areas suggesting pacing or movement during rest periods. Your ancestors had night people, individuals whose circadian rhythms didn't quite match the majority, who felt alert when others felt drowsy, who found darkness energizing rather than soporific. And the tribe accommodated them. Here's where Ice Age wisdom shows itself. They didn't treat insomnia as a disorder requiring fixing. They treated it as variation requiring accommodation. If someone couldn't sleep, fine. Make yourself useful during your wakefulness. Keep better watch. Work on projects that don't disturb others. Think through problems that daylight doesn't allow time for. Your inability to sleep like others became an asset, not a liability. Historians still argue about what caused Ice Age insomnia. Was it genetic? Some people just wired differently? Almost certainly partially this. Was it trauma, injuries, losses, experiences that made deep sleep feel dangerous? Probably this too. PTSD isn't modern. Anyone who's watched a friend die to a predator, who survived a near-death experience, who's endured significant trauma might struggle with hypervigilance that prevents rest. Your ancestors experienced these things regularly. Some of them carried the scars in their sleep patterns. Was it anxiety, worry about the future, about resources, about threats? Yes, though probably less than modern anxiety. But some people have always been worriers, even the Ice Age. And there's an eccentric detail that researchers find fascinating. Some evidence suggests that chronic poor sleepers in Ice Age tribes often became shamans or spiritual leaders. Their different consciousness, their time spent awake while others slept, their experiences in the liminal space between day and night. All of this marked them as having access to different knowledge, different perspectives. They saw things others didn't. Literally, they were awake during hours others weren't. But also metaphorically, their relationship with consciousness was different. And this was valued, not pitted, not medicated, not seen as broken, but recognized as a different way of being that served tribal needs. The night walker who kept watch, the thinker who solved problems in darkness, the spiritual guide who communicated with realms others couldn't access. Your ancestors found roles for people who couldn't sleep normally, gave them purpose, gave them value, gave them a place in the tribe that didn't require fixing their sleep. And maybe because of that acceptance, the insomnia was less distressing. We are not anxious about being awake. When being awake has purpose and acceptance. When the tribe doesn't view you as broken, the wakefulness might not disappear, but it becomes bearable, sometimes even meaningful. Compare this to modern insomnia treatment. The shame, the anxiety, the sense of personal failure, the medications, the sleep hygiene lectures, the constant message that you're doing it wrong. The isolation of lying awake alone in a dark bedroom, wondering what's wrong with you. Your insomniac ancestors didn't have that experience. They had wakefulness, but they also had purpose, acceptance, and a tribe that found ways to make their different sleep pattern valuable rather than shameful. And there were probably times when chronic poor sleepers still found rest. After extreme exertion, during winter dormancy periods, in moments of particular safety and peace. Their insomnia wasn't absolute, just their baseline was different. They needed more specific conditions to achieve rest. And when those conditions aligned, they slept. Historians also note that tribes likely had knowledge about herbs and practices that helped difficult sleepers. The same plants used recreationally in bedding might be used medicinally for those who struggled. Warmer sleeping positions for those whose alertness was temperature-related. Specific sleeping companions who helped anxious individuals feel safer. Not pharmaceutical solutions, but practical, individualized accommodations based on observation and care. Your ancestors weren't perfect. Their sleep wasn't perfect. Some of them struggled, just like some modern people struggle. But the response to that struggle was different. Less pathologizing, more integrating. Finding the value in variation rather than trying to force everyone into identical patterns. And maybe there's wisdom there. For those of you listening who struggle with sleep, who've tried everything and still lie awake, who feel broken because rest doesn't come easily, your Ice Age ancestors would say, you're not broken. You're variant. And variation has always existed. The question isn't how to fix you. It's how to make your wakefulness meaningful. How to find purpose in those hours. How to stop fighting what you are and start accepting it, maybe even using it, the way they did, for thousands of years, when night walkers were valued, when different sleep was just different, not wrong, just different, and that was enough. The first lullabies. Let's talk about sound again, but this time, the sounds humans made deliberately to help each other sleep, because your ancestors didn't just accept the ambient noise of the cave. They added to it, created it. Used their voices as tools for rest. The first lullabies weren't songs, probably, not in the way we think of songs. They were rhythmic sounds, repetitive vocalizations. SHHHH, sounds that mimicked wind or water. Humming that created vibration and warmth. Soft, low tones that calmed rather than stimulated. Mothers did this instinctively with infants. Held them close and made sounds that regulated breathing, that lowered heart rate, that signaled safety. These weren't learned behaviors from parenting books. They were biological responses. Your body knows how to soothe another human, knows what frequencies calm, knows what rhythms synchronize. And Ice Age mothers used this knowledge every night. But it wasn't just mothers and infants. Adults soothed each other too. A partner humming softly as you drifted off. An elder singing wordless melodies to settle restless children. The tribe creating an auditory environment that promoted rest. And there's evidence, circumstantial but compelling, that Ice Age humans discovered certain vocal patterns worked better than others. Low frequencies, steady rhythms, repetitive phrases. The same elements that modern lullabies contain. not because someone composed them artistically, but because these patterns work. They trigger biological responses that facilitate sleep. Historians still argue about when actual melodic lullabies developed. Did Ice Age people have music sophisticated enough for songs? The answer is probably yes. Archaeological evidence of bone flutes dates back 40,000 years. If they could make instruments, they could certainly make intentional music. And what would you sing in a cave at night? Probably not rousing battle songs or complex narratives. You'd sing something soft, something repetitive, something that helped everyone drift off. The world's first lullabies. And here's an eccentric detail. Some researchers believe certain lullaby structures might be among humanity's oldest cultural artifacts, older than specific languages, older than particular stories or myths, because the need to soothe sleeping children is universal, and the vocal patterns that work are consistent across cultures. Simple melodies, falling pitch contours, notes that descend create calm. Slow tempo, matching resting heart rate around 60 beats per minute. Repetition, the brain stops having to predict what comes next and can relax. Your ancestors figured this out, not scientifically, but practically, through thousands of generations of soothing children to sleep. And those patterns persisted, passed down mother to daughter, father to son, adapted to different languages and cultures, but maintaining the core elements that work, that help humans sleep. The lullabies you might sing to your children today, they carry echoes of Ice Age caves, of firelight and darkness, of a mother humming to her baby in rhythms that have soothed humans for 30,000 years. And it's not just the melody. It's the act of vocalization itself. Making sound together creates social bonding, releases oxytocin, the trust hormone, synchronizes breathing between singer and listener. When your ancestor hummed a child to sleep, she was doing something more than making pretty sounds. She was regulating that child's nervous system with her own, entraining their breathing and heart rate to match hers, creating physiological synchrony through voice. Modern science has confirmed this works. Singing to babies measurably calms them, lowers cortisol, increases oxytocin, regulates arousal. Your ancestors knew it worked too, felt it work every night, and kept doing it because it mattered, because rest mattered, because helping your tribe sleep was part of surviving together. And there's something about being sung to sleep that modern adults have mostly lost. When did someone last sing you to sleep? Not play music on a device, but actually use their voice to soothe you into rest. For most modern adults, the answer is childhood, or never. But your ancestors did this across the lifespan. Sang to babies, yes, but also to sick tribe members, to injured hunters, to anyone struggling to rest. Used voice as medicine, as comfort, as a bridge between waking and sleeping. And maybe we've lost something profound there. The intimacy of being vocally soothed. The trust required to let someone sing you to sleep. The generosity of using your voice to help another person rest. Your ancestors understood that sleep was communal, that helping each other rest was part of helping each other survive, and that sometimes the best tool for that was simply voice. Soft, rhythmic, repetitive, carrying you down into darkness. With sound that said, "You're safe. You're not alone. You can rest now. Someone is watching. Someone is here. And everything will be okay until morning." The first lullabies probably said that, in whatever language existed then, or maybe in no language at all. Just sound, just rhythm, just the human voice doing what it does best. Connecting, soothing, promising safety through the darkness. Until dawn, when sickness disrupted sleep. Now we need to acknowledge something difficult. Ice Age sleep wasn't always peaceful, wasn't always restorative, because your ancestors got sick. And sickness disrupted sleep in ways that no amount of natural living could fix. Infections without antibiotics, injuries without proper treatment, parasites that modern medicine has mostly eliminated, dental problems that cause chronic pain, illnesses we can't even identify from skeletal remains. All of these shattered sleep. Your ancestor with an infected wound would lie awake in fever and pain. The person suffering from pneumonia would cough through the night, unable to breathe deeply enough for rest. Someone with a parasitic infestation would itch and cramp and find sleep nearly impossible, and the tribe would try to help, would position the sick person near the fire for warmth, would bring water throughout the night, would stay awake with them so they weren't alone in their suffering. But ultimately, sleep came poorly or not at all, until the illness resolved or the person died. Because that happened too. Death from what we now consider minor infections, from injuries that modern medicine could easily treat, from illnesses that antibiotics would cure in days. Your ancestors lived with this reality constantly, and it affected everyone's sleep, not just the sick person's. A child coughing through the night kept parents awake. Someone moaning in pain disrupted the entire cave. The anxiety of watching a tribe member suffer, wondering if they'd survive, created stress that prevented rest. Historians find evidence of this in skeletal remains. Bones showing long-term illness, healed fractures that must have caused months of difficult sleep during recovery, dental abscesses that would have created excruciating nighttime pain. These weren't rare exceptions. These were common aspects of Ice Age life. And there's evidence that chronic pain sufferers may have developed different sleeping patterns. Lighter sleep by necessity. Deep sleep becomes impossible when you're hurting. More frequent position changes to find comfort. Reliance on specific sleeping arrangements or supports that minimize pain. The tribe would accommodate this. Extra padding for someone with a back injury. Specific positioning for someone with a broken bone. Allowing someone in chronic pain to sleep in warmer or more sheltered spots. Not because of hierarchy, but because survival required getting whatever rest was possible. And sometimes the sleep disruption was temporary. A short illness, a minor injury, a parasitic infestation that could be treated with herbs or eventually passed. Sleep would normalize after recovery, but other times it was permanent. A poorly healed fracture causing lifelong pain. Chronic conditions that Ice Age medicine couldn't address. Disabilities that required permanent accommodation. And the tribe adapted, found ways to help those people get whatever rest they could. Recognized that their sleep would always be different, harder, less restorative than others, and made space for that reality without abandoning the person. There's an eccentric detail that researchers find significant. Some skeletal remains show evidence of individuals who survived for years with conditions that should have killed them quickly. Severe injuries, chronic illnesses, disabilities that would have made independent survival impossible. These people lived because their tribes kept them alive, fed them, cared for them, helped them sleep despite their conditions. This suggests a level of compassion and communal support that challenges the brutal survival stereotype of Ice Age life. Yes, life was hard. Yes, sickness and injury were common and often fatal. But within the tribe, there was care. There was accommodation. There was recognition that sleep, even imperfect, disrupted sleep, mattered for everyone. In modern people experiencing chronic pain or illness that disrupts sleep, you have something in common with your ancestors. They knew this struggle too, knew the exhaustion of hurting too much to rest properly, knew the frustration of trying every position and finding none comfortable, knew the anxiety of wondering if you'd ever sleep well again. You're not alone in that experience. It's part of the human condition, has been forever. The difference is how it was handled. Your ancestors couldn't fix most illnesses, couldn't eliminate most pain, couldn't cure the conditions that disrupted sleep, but they could offer presence, could stay awake with you through the difficult nights, could adjust your sleeping arrangements to maximize whatever comfort was possible, could treat disrupted sleep as a fact to be accommodated rather than a failure to be ashamed of. And maybe there's something to learn there. For those of you whose sleep is disrupted by pain or illness or conditions beyond your control, you're not failing at sleep. You're dealing with what humans have always dealt with. The question isn't how to sleep perfectly despite your condition. It's how to accept the sleep you can get, how to stop fighting what is, how to accommodate rather than condemn, the way your ancestors did. When sickness came to the cave, and sleep became difficult, and the tribe adapted, because that's what survival looked like. Not perfect rest for everyone, but whatever rest was possible, honored rather than judged, accepted rather than fought, accommodated rather than condemned. And somehow, despite everything, morning still came. Territory and sleep security. Let's talk about something that determined whether your ancestors could sleep at all. The cave itself, because not every group had one, and those who did fought to keep it. A good cave, the kind we've been describing, with proper depth, orientation, temperature, and safety, was valuable beyond measure. More valuable than food in some ways. Because food could be found, but ideal caves were finite, limited by geology, and multiple groups wanted them. Your ancestors understood this, which meant that cave ownership was serious business. Territorial disputes over sleeping locations were probably common, maybe even frequent, and the stress of defending your cave, or searching for a new one, or living in a suboptimal shelter affected sleep profoundly. Imagine sleeping in a cave other groups covet. The hypervigilance, the constant awareness that an attack could come, the need for stronger watches, better defenses, more alertness. This created chronic low-level stress, not the acute stress of a hunt that resolves, but ongoing anxiety about territorial security, which meant lighter sleep, more wakings, reduced rest quality. The better your cave, paradoxically, the more stress it might create, because valuable caves attracted competition. Historians still argue about how violent Ice Age territorial disputes became. Some evidence suggests ritualized displays and intimidation rather than actual warfare. Other evidence shows trauma consistent with interpersonal violence. Probably both occurred depending on circumstances and cultures. But either way, the possibility of conflict over sleeping territory affected how people rested. And some groups didn't have good caves at all, were displaced by stronger groups, or lived in regions where suitable caves didn't exist. These people made do with rock overhangs, dense vegetation, or temporary structures, and their sleep suffered. Less protection from elements, less defense against predators, less temperature stability, more stress, less rest. Archaeological evidence shows that groups with better shelters had better health outcomes, longer lifespans, lower infant mortality, more successful survival through harsh conditions. And sleep quality was likely a significant factor in those outcomes. Because rest matters, recovery matters, and if you can't sleep securely, everything else becomes harder. There's an eccentric detail that researchers find fascinating. Some cave systems show evidence of multiple groups using different chambers simultaneously. Not peacefully, necessarily, but coexisting through necessity or temporary truces. Imagine sleeping knowing that a rival group was in another passage, hearing their fires, their voices, their movements. Not immediate danger, some agreement or stalemate preventing violence. But not safety either, just uneasy coexistence in a shared resource. That would create particular sleep stress. Neither the alert vigilance of active conflict, nor the relaxed trust of complete security. Just chronic unease that would fragment sleep quality. And then there were migrations. When resources failed or climate shifted, groups moved, abandoning familiar caves to search for new territory. This transition period was probably terrible for sleep. Sleeping in unfamiliar locations, not knowing the sounds, the threats, the safe spots. Increased vulnerability while establishing new territory. Higher stress until a new cave was secured and defended. Your ancestors who migrated probably slept poorly for months or even years, until new territory became familiar, until new defenses were established, until the psychological sense of this is ours, this is safe could develop. And there's evidence that some groups successfully defended prime caves for generations. The same families, the same locations passed down through lineages, creating deep familiarity, deep security, deep trust that this place was truly home. These groups probably slept better than nomadic groups or recently displaced populations, because territorial security creates psychological safety, which enables physiological rest. Modern people mostly don't worry about this. Your home is legally yours. Police exist to defend property rights. Nobody's going to attack your bedroom for territory. And yet, many people still sleep poorly because they don't feel secure in their homes. for different reasons than Ice Age territorial disputes. But the underlying psychology is similar. If you don't feel safe where you sleep, you won't sleep deeply. Your ancestors knew this viscerally. A good cave wasn't just nice to have. It was essential for survival. And defending it, securing it, making it truly yours, that was worth fighting for, worth stressing over, worth the hypervigilance and reduced sleep that came with protection. Because the alternative, no secure sleeping place at all, was worse. Much worse. So they accepted the trade-off. Less perfect sleep in exchange for defended territory. Lighter rest in exchange for security. The stress of protecting what you had rather than the chaos of having nothing to protect. And they slept. Not perfectly, not always deeply, but securely enough. In caves that were theirs. Defended. Maintained. Passed down. Home. Where morning would come. And tonight you could rest. Because this place was yours. And you'd fight to keep it that way. The gradual warming begins. Now I need to talk about the end. Not the end of humans, but the end of the Ice Age. And with it, the end of the sleep patterns we've been describing. Around 15,000 years ago, Earth's climate began to shift. Slowly at first, imperceptibly to any individual lifetime, but unmistakably over generations. The glaciers started retreating, temperatures rose. Ice that had covered northern continents for 100,000 years began to melt, and your ancestors noticed. Springs came earlier. Winters grew shorter. Animals changed their migration patterns. Plants appeared in regions they'd never grown before. The world was transforming, and sleep began transforming with it. Because as temperatures warmed, some of the factors that had created optimal Ice Age sleep started disappearing. Winters became less brutal, which meant less need for extended winter dormancy, less biological pressure to sleep 14 to 16 hours during the darkest months. Your ancestors gradually shifted toward more consistent year-round sleep patterns. The caves that had been essential for survival became less critical. You could survive outside them more easily, build structures, stay in open-air settlements during warmer months, which meant the deep cave darkness that had promoted maximum melatonin production wasn't always present. Summer nights in open-air camps had starlight, moonlight, the glow of larger fires that could be maintained outside without smoke concerns. More ambient light meant slightly less profound darkness, which meant subtle changes in sleep neurochemistry. And as the climate warmed, food became more available, less scarcity, less starvation pressure, which reduced some stress, but also reduced some of the physical exhaustion that had created such deep sleep. Historians still argue about how quickly these changes affected human behavior. Did people notice their sleep changing? Probably not consciously. The shifts were too gradual. But over hundreds of generations, the cumulative effect was significant. And there were new animals. As the ice retreated, ecosystems transformed. New prey species emerged. Some Ice Age megafauna went extinct. The mammoths, the giant sloths, the cave bears. Hunting strategies had to adapt, which changed daily activity patterns, which changed sleep timing and quality. The profound exhaustion of days-long mammoth hunts became less common as those animals disappeared, replaced by different hunting patterns that might not push bodies to the same extremes. Different exhaustion creates different sleep. And there's an eccentric detail that researchers find significant. As climate warmed and populations grew, human groups began encountering each other more frequently. More competition for territory. More interaction, both peaceful and violent. More social complexity, which created new forms of stress that affected sleep differently than Ice Age stressors had. Not the immediate danger of predators or starvation, but the chronic complexity of dealing with other human groups. Politics, essentially. And politics has always been bad for sleep. The transition from Ice Age to what scientists call the Holocene, our current geological epoch, was gradual, taking thousands of years. But it fundamentally changed human life and human sleep. Your ancestors 12,000 years ago were sleeping differently than their ancestors 30,000 years ago. Not dramatically different yet, but the trajectory had begun. Away from the deep, dark, cold, exhaustion-driven sleep of Ice Age caves, toward something more like modern sleep patterns, still natural in many ways, still regulated by sunset and sunrise, still influenced by seasons and social structures, but beginning to diverge from the patterns that had defined human sleep for hundreds of thousands of years. And within a few thousand more years, something even more transformative would happen. Something that would shatter the old sleep patterns almost completely. But that's the next chapter. For now, understand that around 15,000 years ago, the world your ancestors knew began ending. The ice retreated, the climate warmed, and sleep, deep, primal, Ice Age sleep, began its slow transformation. Your ancestors didn't know they were living through a transition, didn't realize they were the last generations to experience truly Ice Age sleep patterns. They just adapted, as humans always do, finding new ways to rest as the world changed around them. Sleeping a little less in winter, spending more time in lighter shelters, adjusting to warmer nights and different rhythms, still sleeping well by modern standards, but no longer sleeping quite the way their distant ancestors had. The deep freeze was ending, and with it, an era of human sleep that had lasted longer than recorded history, that had shaped human biology and psychology in ways we still carry, that had created rest so profound that modern people can barely imagine it. But that was inevitably coming to an end, because everything ends, even ice ages, even perfect darkness, even the deepest sleep humans would ever know. Morning was coming for the whole species, and everything would change. Agriculture's first sleep casualty. And then came the revolution that changed everything. Not quickly, not dramatically at first, but irreversibly. Around 10,000 years ago, humans began farming, deliberately planting seeds, cultivating crops, domesticating animals, creating food instead of just finding it. This is called the Neolithic Revolution, and historians celebrate it as humanity's great leap forward. And it was, in many ways. But for sleep, it was a disaster, because farming introduced something that hunter-gatherers rarely experienced: schedule pressure. Crops need to be planted at specific times, harvested at specific times, tended on regular schedules regardless of whether you feel rested. You can't tell your wheat, "I'm tired today, I'll harvest you when I feel better." The wheat doesn't care. It's ready when it's ready. And if you don't harvest in time, you starve. So your ancestors who transitioned to farming suddenly had externally imposed schedules. Wake times dictated by agricultural needs, not biological readiness. Work hours dictated by seasonal demands, not energy levels. Sleep times squeezed into whatever hours remained after necessary tasks were done. This was completely new. Hunter-gatherers had flexibility. If you were exhausted, you rested more. If prey was scarce one day, you tried again tomorrow. If the weather was terrible, you stayed in the cave. But farmers couldn't do that. The crops demanded attention, regardless of how you felt, regardless of how you'd slept. And there were new worries that kept farmers awake at night. Hunter-gatherers worried about today's food. But once today's food was secured, worry could ease. Farmers worried about next season's harvest, about stored grain being sufficient through winter, about droughts, floods, pests, diseases affecting crops, about surplus and scarcity and planning months ahead. Future-focused anxiety entered human consciousness in new ways. And future-focused anxiety is terrible for sleep because it doesn't resolve. There's no moment of "the threat is handled, now I can rest." Just constant vigilance about what might happen, what could go wrong, whether you've planned adequately. Historians still argue about whether early farmers recognized that their sleep was deteriorating. Probably not consciously. The transition happened over many generations. No one alive remembered what hunter-gatherer sleep felt like. But the archaeological evidence suggests health declined during the agricultural transition. Shorter lifespans in early farming communities compared to hunter-gatherer groups. More dental problems, nutritional deficiencies, diseases, and almost certainly worse sleep. There's an eccentric detail that researchers find telling. Early farming settlements show evidence of night work. Grain processing that appears to have happened after dark. Tool maintenance and preparation for next day's labor. People extending their waking hours to accommodate agricultural demands. Using firelight to work beyond sunset. Stealing time from sleep to meet farming's relentless schedule. This was unprecedented. Hunter-gatherers rarely worked at night. Night was for rest, for safety, for darkness and recovery. But farmers had too much to do. Too many tasks that daylight hours alone couldn't accommodate. So they borrowed from sleep, and their bodies paid the price. And there was a new form of stress, property anxiety. Hunter-gatherers owned what they could carry. When you moved camps, you left most things behind. But farmers accumulated, stored grain, built permanent structures, on land, livestock, tools, possessions, all of which could be lost, stolen, destroyed. And the worry about protecting property created chronic stress that hunter-gatherers never experienced at this scale. Your stuff could be raided while you slept. Your fields could be damaged. Your stores depleted. So you slept lighter, more vigilantly, less trustingly, because you had so much to lose now. And the social structure changed too. Farming communities grew larger than hunter-gatherer bands. More people meant more social complexity, more relationships to manage, more politics, more hierarchy, more conflict, more reasons to lie awake at night, replaying conversations or worrying about social standing. The simplicity of tribal life, where everyone knew everyone, where roles were clear, where consensus was possible, gave way to the complexity of agricultural villages. And complexity is exhausting, mentally, emotionally, and in ways that disrupt sleep. Your farmer ancestors 8,000 years ago were sleeping less than their hunter-gatherer ancestors, probably 2 to 3 hours less per night. Not because they wanted to, but because the demands of agricultural life didn't allow more. And this set a pattern that would only intensify. Each innovation in civilization would claim a little more sleep. Each step away from hunter-gatherer simplicity would cost a little more rest, until we arrived at modern life, where sleep has become something we struggle with instead of something that simply happens. The seeds of that struggle were planted, literally, when your ancestors first planted seeds, when they chose agriculture, when they gave up the flexibility and simplicity of hunter-gatherer life for the productivity and surplus of farming. It was a trade. More food security in exchange for less sleep security. More control over environment in exchange for less control over rest. And whether that trade was worth it, well, that depends on who you ask and what you value. But for sleep, for deep, natural, biologically appropriate rest, agriculture was the beginning of the end. The first major step away from how humans had slept for hundreds of thousands of years, toward how we sleep now, which is to say, not very well. Villages brought new noise. Let's talk about what happened when your ancestors stopped moving, when they built permanent settlements, when they became neighbors, because villages changed the soundscape of sleep completely. Remember that cave silence we talked about? The controlled acoustic environment where familiar sounds meant safety? That disappeared when humans started living in permanent settlements. Suddenly, your sleeping area wasn't separated from others by distance or stone walls. It was separated by thin hide walls, or by nothing but a few feet of space. Your neighbors were right there, and neighbors are loud. A baby crying 3 shelters away. Couples arguing in the next dwelling. Someone coughing through the night. Livestock penned nearby. Goats bleating, dogs barking, chickens disturbing at dawn. Tools being worked on at odd hours. Communal fires with people coming and going. The constant, unavoidable noise of multiple families living in close proximity. This was radically different from cave life. In caves, the tribe slept together, yes, but it was one group with shared rhythms. Everyone going to sleep around the same time. Everyone waking around the same time. Coordinated rest. In villages, different families had different schedules, different needs, different levels of consideration for others' sleep. Some people were noisy. Some people didn't care, and you couldn't escape it. Historians find evidence of this transition in the archaeological record. Early villages show signs of noise mitigation attempts. Dwellings positioned with sleeping areas facing away from communal spaces. Attempts at soundproofing with additional layers of hide or packed earth. Social rules about quiet hours. We can infer this from later written records, but it probably began earlier. Your ancestors recognized that village noise was a problem and try to manage it, but only partially successfully, because fundamentally, living close to others means sharing their sounds. And not all sounds are conducive to sleep. There's an eccentric detail that researchers find interesting. Some early agricultural settlements show evidence of spatial segregation. Certain areas designated for families with young children. Other areas for livestock. Still others for noisy activities like metalworking or pottery. This suggests conscious planning around noise management. Recognition that sound affected sleep. Attempts to create zones where rest was more possible. But even with planning, village life was fundamentally noisier than cave or camp life. And your ancestors' sleep suffered. More frequent wakings. Lighter sleep overall. Difficulty falling asleep when neighbors were still active. The loss of that deep, quiet darkness that caves had provided. And there were new sounds that caves never had. Construction noise. Villages required constant building and maintenance. Hammering, sawing, heavy objects being moved. Market sounds in larger settlements. Trading, haggling, the bustle of commerce. Religious or ceremonial activities. Drumming, chanting, celebrations that might last late into night. Government or leadership activities. Meetings, announcements, the sounds of social organization. Civilization was loud, and it stayed loud later into the evening and started earlier in the morning than natural sleep patterns preferred. Compare this to the hunter-gatherer experience. When the tribe settled for the night, everything quieted. Darkness meant rest for almost everyone. The sounds were natural: wind, fire, breathing. Not the artificial cacophony of human industry and proximity. And modern people have inherited this problem exponentially. Villages were noisy compared to caves, but cities are deafening compared to villages. The escalation of noise pollution has been continuous throughout civilization. Each step away from natural living, adding more sound that disrupts sleep. Your village-dwelling ancestors 7,000 years ago thought their lives were loud. They had no idea. No conception of traffic, sirens, airplanes, construction equipment, car alarms, loud music from passing vehicles. The noise levels that modern urban dwellers accept as normal would have seemed like torture to them, would have made sleep feel impossible. And yet we wonder why we need white noise machines, why we need earplugs, why we can't sleep without actively blocking the sounds of our own civilization. Your ancestors created this problem when they built villages, when they chose proximity over solitude, community over quiet. And each generation since has made it a little worse, a little louder, a little more disruptive to the silence that human sleep evolved to require. But we can't go back, can't return to caves or hunting camps, can't uninvent villages or cities or the noise that comes with them. So we adapt, we cope, we buy devices to cover the sounds with other sounds. We wear earplugs and hope we'll still hear the alarm. We accept that sleep will happen despite noise, not because of its absence. And we've lost something profound in that acceptance. The deep silence, the acoustic simplicity, the soundscape where every noise meant something and most of the time there was no noise at all. Just darkness, just breathing, just the quiet that allows rest to come gently, without resistance, without effort, the way it did before villages changed everything, before neighbors meant noise, before civilization taught us that sleep must happen despite our environment, rather than because of it. The invention of worry. Now I need to talk about what changed inside your ancestors' heads. Because external circumstances, villages, farms, schedules, weren't the only things disrupting sleep. Something internal shifted too. Something cognitive. Something that would haunt human sleep forever after. Your ancestors invented worry. Not fear. That's ancient, primal, shared with animals. Not anxiety about immediate threats. That's survival instinct. But worry. Abstract, future-focused, ruminating thought patterns about things that haven't happened yet. and might never happen. This was new, and it was devastating for sleep. Hunter-gatherers had concerns, of course, but their concerns were concrete and immediate. Is there food today? Hunt. Is there danger now? Respond. Is someone injured? Treat them. Present tense problems with present tense solutions. And once addressed, the mind could rest. But agricultural civilization introduced future tense thinking. Will the harvest be sufficient? You won't know for months. Will winter stores last? You won't know until winter ends. Will raiders come? You won't know until they do or don't. Will the drought continue? Only time will tell. Suddenly, your ancestors were living with questions that had no immediate answers. Problems that couldn't be solved right now. Uncertainties that had to be carried forward. Day after day, night after night. And the human mind, incredibly sophisticated at planning and abstract thinking, became incredibly bad at knowing when to stop. When to say, I've thought about this enough. I can rest now. Instead, the mind would loop, reviewing the same concerns, generating new scenarios, worrying at problems like a dog worrying at a bone, finding no resolution because resolution was impossible until the future arrived. Historians still argue about when this cognitive shift fully occurred. Was it gradual across the agricultural transition? Or was there a more sudden change as settlements grew and social complexity increased? We'll never know precisely. But the evidence suggests that by 5,000 years ago, humans were definitely worrying in ways that disrupted sleep. Written records from early civilizations describe it. Mesopotamian texts mention sleeplessness from worry. Egyptian remedies for troubled sleep caused by thoughts that circle. Chinese medical texts discussing the mind's inability to quiet. Your ancestors recognized this was a problem, and they tried to solve it. Meditation practices emerged. Prayer rituals designed to ease worried minds. Herbal remedies specifically for thinking too much at night. Social practices around problem sharing to distribute worry across communities rather than individuals carrying it alone. But none of these fully worked, because the underlying issue wasn't solvable. Civilization requires future planning, requires abstract thinking, requires carrying forward complex problems that have no immediate solutions. And the brain that can do this during the day can't easily shut it off at night. The same cognitive abilities that allowed your ancestors to plan harvests, build cities, and create culture also created the ability to lie awake at 2 a.m. worrying about things that might never happen. There's an eccentric detail that psychologists find fascinating. Some evidence suggests that chronic worriers in early civilizations often became planners, strategists, or advisors. Their tendency to imagine negative scenarios made them valuable for anticipating problems. Their inability to stop thinking about the future helped communities prepare. So worry, like insomnia, found a social niche, a way to be useful rather than just torturous. But that didn't make it any easier to sleep with. And there's a cruel irony here. The more successful your civilization became, the more there was to worry about. More possessions to protect. More social relationships to manage. More future scenarios to plan for. Where could go wrong? Hunter-gatherers had simple lives. Hard, dangerous, but simple. You could lose everything in a day, yes. But you didn't have much to lose. And you couldn't plan your way out of most threats anyway. So worry served no function. But civilized humans? They had everything to lose. And planning could help protect it. So worry became adaptive. Useful. Necessary even. Just terrible for sleep. And we've inherited this. Your worried mind tonight, spinning through scenarios and problems and what-ifs. That's not a personal failing. That's civilization. That's the cognitive architecture required for complex social living. That's your brain doing exactly what it evolved to do over the past 10,000 years. The problem is that evolution hasn't caught up, hasn't figured out how to give us the planning abilities we need during the day without the rumination that destroys sleep at night. So we're stuck, with minds powerful enough to build cities and worry ourselves into exhaustion. Your hunter-gatherer ancestors didn't have this problem. They thought about today, solved today's problems, and slept. But your farming ancestors, your village-dwelling ancestors, your civilized ancestors, They thought about tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow, and lay awake, worrying, unable to stop, unable to rest, inventing insomnia one anxious thought at a time, and passing that pattern forward, generation after generation, until it reached you, lying there tonight, thinking about things that might never happen, problems you can't solve right now, futures you can't control, just like your ancestors 5,000 years ago, who invented this particular form of torture and didn't know how to stop it, and neither do we. Artificial light's tiny beginning. Now we come to the innovation that would ultimately destroy natural sleep more completely than anything else. But it started so innocently, so small, just a little flame in a bowl of oil, burning after sunset. Your ancestors around 5,000 years ago, maybe earlier in some regions, began using oil lamps. Not torches, which were inefficient and temporary, but actual lamps. Stone or clay vessels filled with animal fat or plant oil, with a wick that burned steadily for hours. This was revolutionary technology, and at first it seemed purely beneficial. Extended the useful evening hours, allowed work or socializing after sunset, provided safety and comfort in darkness. What would be wrong with that? Everything, it turns out, though your ancestors couldn't have known, because oil lamps introduced the first sustained artificial light into human sleeping environments. And light, any light, suppresses melatonin. We talked about firelight earlier, and yes, fires produce light. But fires are difficult to control. They're kept at a distance from sleeping areas because of smoke and heat. They naturally die down as night progresses. They're more contained, more manageable. Oil lamps were different. They could be placed anywhere, right next to where you slept, in sleeping areas, not just communal spaces. They burned steadily for hours without attention. They produced focused light rather than diffuse glow, and people started using them for entirely reasonable purposes. Checking on children at night, tending to sick family members, reading once literacy developed, working on detailed tasks that required vision. All innocent uses, but all creating light exposure after sunset that humans had never experienced before. And that light, even from a small oil lamp, was enough to begin disrupting circadian rhythms. Not dramatically at first, not like modern electric lights, but subtly, enough that melatonin production started later. Sleep came less easily. The natural darkness-triggered drowsiness was partially suppressed. Historians still argue about how quickly this affected population-level sleep quality. Was it noticeable within generations, or so gradual that nobody realized what was being lost? Probably the latter, because each generation inherited slightly worse sleep than the previous. But the change was slow enough that it seemed normal. There's an eccentric detail that researchers find significant. Some ancient medical texts begin discussing sleep problems around the same time oil lamps became common. Recommendations for darkening sleeping areas. Advice about limiting evening activities. Recognition that something about civilized life was making sleep more difficult. They didn't connect it directly to oil lamps. The relationship between light and melatonin wouldn't be understood for thousands more years. But they noticed something had changed, and they tried to adapt. But the problem was that oil lamps were too useful to abandon. The productivity gains from extended evening hours were too valuable. The safety benefits from nighttime illumination were too appreciated. So the lamps stayed and multiplied, from one lamp per household to several, from occasional use to nightly use, from dim light to brighter lamps with better wicks and cleaner oils. Each improvement in lighting technology was celebrated as progress. And each one made sleep a little harder, a little less natural, a little further from the deep darkness that human biology required. And here's the cruel progression. Oil lamps led to candles. Candles led to gas lights. Gas lights led to electric lights. Each step bringing more light, more control, more freedom from darkness. And each step making sleep more difficult. Your ancestors 5,000 years ago, who first lit an oil lamp in their sleeping area, had no idea what they were starting. No conception that this tiny flame was the first step toward a world where darkness barely exists. where streetlights and billboards and phone screens mean that darkness is optional, avoidable, where humans can live their entire lives without ever experiencing true night. They just wanted to see after sunset, wanted the practical benefits of extended vision, and couldn't have imagined the cumulative cost over thousands of years. The sleep we've lost, the circadian rhythms we've destroyed, the melatonin we've suppressed, all starting with one small lamp, one innocent innovation, one improvement that made life easier in the moment while creating problems we're still dealing with today. And we can't go back. Can't uninvent electric lights or oil lamps or any of the illumination technology that's followed. Can't return to the deep darkness that human sleep evolved to require. We can only try to manage, to minimize light exposure before bed, to recreate darkness with blackout curtains and masks, to respect our biology even though our environment fights it. Your ancestors who first lit that lamp made a choice. Not consciously, not understanding the trade-off, but a choice nonetheless. Between darkness and productivity. Between natural sleep and extended evenings. Between biology and civilization. And civilization won, as it always does, leaving us to cope with the consequences. To try to sleep in a world that never fully darkens. To long for the complete blackness that once came automatically, that helped humans rest for hundreds of thousands of years. Before someone thought, what if we had light after sunset? What if we didn't have to stop when darkness came? What if we could keep going? And we've been keeping going ever since. Straight past the bedtime our bodies need. Into the artificial light that keeps us awake, whether we want to be or not. Why we can't go back? So maybe you're thinking, why not just return to Ice Age sleeping patterns? Live like our ancestors did. Reclaim that deep, natural rest. It seems simple, doesn't it? Go to bed at sunset. Sleep in darkness. Wake naturally. Eliminate artificial light and schedules. Just do what they did. But here's the hard truth. You can't. Not really. Not completely. Because the world that made Ice Age sleep possible no longer exists. And neither do you. Not in the biological sense that made that sleep inevitable. Let's start with biology. Your body is different from your Ice Age ancestors' bodies. Not dramatically, not in ways you can see, but in subtle, significant ways that affect sleep. Your ancestors walked 10 to 15 miles per day. Every day. For their entire lives. Their baseline physical conditioning was extreme by modern standards. That level of daily exhaustion created sleep pressure that you probably never experience. Even if you exercise regularly. Even if you think you're active, you're not hunter-gatherer active. Your body isn't crying out for rest the way theirs did. And without that physical depletion, sleep comes less easily. Your ancestors' caloric needs were different too, burning 3,000 to 5,000 calories daily just to survive. Their metabolisms ran differently. Their hormones cycled differently. Their entire physiology was calibrated to extreme demands. You can't replicate that by going to the gym for an hour. It's a completely different biological state. And there's environmental exposure. Your ancestors spent all day, every day outside, in natural light, in temperature variations, in weather. Their circadian rhythms were constantly reinforced by direct sunlight exposure. Hours of it daily. You might get 30 minutes on your commute if you're lucky. Most people get almost none. And without that strong daily light signal, your circadian clock drifts, becomes less precise, less responsive to evening darkness. Then there's the social structure. Ice Age sleep worked because entire tribes slept together, on the same schedule, with shared vigilance and mutual support. You can't recreate that. You live in a society where everyone has different schedules, where 24-hour operations means someone is always awake, always active, always making noise. Where your sleep has to happen despite the world continuing around you. Not because of collective rest. And there's no going back to tribal living for most people. No way to create that communal sleep environment. That shared rhythm. That collective security. You're on your own, trying to sleep in a world that doesn't sleep with you. Then there's the cognitive impossibility. Your brain is different from your Ice Age ancestors' brains. Not structurally, but functionally. You've been trained since childhood to think in ways they never did. Abstract reasoning, future planning, written language, complex social navigation. You can't unlearn these things. Can't turn off the worry circuits that civilization has built. Can't return to the present tense simplicity that made their sleep possible. Your mind is too sophisticated now, too capable of generating anxiety, too skilled at finding problems in the future. And even if you wanted to live like an Ice Age human, the world won't let you. You have obligations, jobs with schedules, rent or mortgage payments requiring consistent income, social expectations about when you should be awake and active, legal requirements to participate in civilization's rhythms. You can't just sleep when it's dark and wake when you're rested. Society has other plans for you. And opting out completely, moving to the wilderness, abandoning civilization, isn't realistic for most people, and wouldn't work anyway, because you're still you. With modern biology, modern cognition, modern needs. You'd just be uncomfortable and isolated, not magically sleeping like your ancestors. Historians still argue about whether any modern attempts at ancestral living actually replicate ancestral experience. The answer is clearly no. You can approximate some elements, can reduce artificial light, can prioritize darkness and natural rhythms, can increase physical activity, but you can't truly recreate conditions that no longer exist, and you can't become someone you're not. So we're stuck, with bodies and brains adapted for one world, living in another, trying to sleep in conditions we weren't designed for, unable to return to the conditions that would make sleep easy, unable to fully adapt to the present, just managing, doing the best we can, with blackout curtains and sleep apps and melatonin supplements and all the other tools we've invented to compensate for what we've lost. It's not your fault that you can't sleep like your ancestors. You were born into a world that makes that impossible. And there's no exit back to the Ice Age, no way to unlearn civilization, no path back to that deep, natural rest. All you can do is understand. Understand what we've lost. Understand why modern sleep is so difficult. Understand that the struggle isn't personal failure. It's historical inevitability. We changed our world, and the world changed us. And sleep became the casualty that we're still trying to manage, still trying to salvage, still hoping to improve, even though we can never fully reclaim what our ancestors had. The sleep they took for granted, that we can barely imagine, that's gone and isn't coming back. What we've lost, let's inventory what's gone. Not to mourn exactly, not to wallow, but to understand, to name what was taken, what was traded away, what disappeared so gradually that most people never noticed it leaving. First and most obvious, darkness. Complete, absolute, uncompromising darkness. The kind where your eyes produce their own light phenomena, phosphenes, just to have something to process. Where your visual cortex gives up and powers down. Where melatonin floods your system without interference. That darkness is gone from most people's lives. Forever. Second, physical exhaustion. The bone-deep tiredness that comes from walking all day. From lifting, carrying, climbing, surviving. From pushing your body to its limits regularly. That creates sleep pressure so powerful that rest becomes inevitable. Most modern people never experience this. They're mentally tired, but their bodies are restless, and sleep comes harder. Third, temperature cycles. The natural cooling as night progresses. The gentle warming as dawn approaches. Environmental cues that support your body's natural temperature drop during sleep. We've eliminated this with climate control. Constant, stable temperature. Fighting the biological signals that helped our ancestors rest. Fourth, silence. Not total silence. Nature was never silent. But the absence of mechanical noise. Of human-created sound pollution. Of the constant industrial hum that modern life produces. The acoustic simplicity that allowed every sound to have meaning. And most sounds to be restful. Fifth, communal sleep security. The psychological safety of sleeping surrounded by your tribe. Knowing others were watching. Sharing warmth and presence. Never being alone in the darkness. Modern people sleep isolated and wonder why they feel unsafe. Why they can't fully relax. Why sleep feels vulnerable. Sixth, schedule flexibility. The ability to sleep when tired, to wake when rested, to adjust to seasons and circumstances, to honor your body's actual needs instead of external demands. This freedom is gone for most people, replaced by alarm clocks and obligations, by schedules that don't care how you slept, by constant override of biological signals. Seventh, the biphasic pattern, the natural waking between first and second sleep, that quiet hour of contemplation and peace, that middle night consciousness that we've pathologized as insomnia. We lost the understanding that this was normal, valuable, part of healthy sleep architecture. Eighth, seasonal variation. Longer sleep in winter, shorter in summer. Bodies adjusting to available daylight. Different rest for different times of year. We've forced consistency where variation belonged, made winter feel wrong instead of natural. Ninth, dream integration. The cultural framework that valued dreams, that interpreted them communally, that used them for decision-making, that honored the sleeping mind's wisdom. We've reduced dreams to random neural noise, lost the meaning they once held, the guidance they once provided. 10th, acceptance of variation. The tribal understanding that people sleep differently, that elders, children, pregnant women, insomniacs all had different needs. That accommodation was normal, that sleep diversity was natural. We pathologized this, made everyone wrong who doesn't fit the standard pattern, created shame where there should be acceptance. 11th, fire, the specific light quality of flames, the hypnotic patterns, the aromatherapy of wood smoke, the auditory white noise of crackling, all replaced by inferior substitutes or eliminated entirely. 12th, connection between effort and rest, the earned quality of sleep after genuine exertion, the satisfaction of lying down after a hard day, the absence of guilt because rest was obviously deserved. Many modern people feel they haven't earned rest, haven't worked hard enough physically to justify sleep, even though they're exhausted mentally. 13th, trust in the body, the default assumption that sleep would come naturally, that your body knew what to do, that rest was automatic, not something to achieve. We've lost that trust, made sleep into a performance, something to succeed or fail at. And finally, simplicity, the straightforward nature of Ice Age sleep. Dark equals sleep, light equals wake, tired equals rest, rested equals active. No complexity, no optimization, no sleep tracking apps or hygiene rules or bedtime protocols. Just the simple biological truth. That's gone now, replaced by complexity, by effort, by constant management of something that should be automatic. This is what we've lost, not all at once, not in ways anyone chose consciously, but gradually, inevitably, as civilization progressed. Each innovation taking a piece, each advance claiming a cost, until we arrived here, in a world where sleep is difficult, where rest requires work, where something that should be the easiest, most natural thing humans do has become a struggle, a problem, a challenge that many people never fully solve. What we've gained in its cost. But fairness requires we acknowledge the other side, because you didn't lose all that sleep quality for nothing. There were trades, and some of them were worth it. Maybe. Let's start with safety. Your ancestors faced genuine threats every night. Predators that could kill you, rival tribes that might attack, environmental dangers, cold, flooding, cave-ins. Death was always possible. You don't have that. You sleep in homes with locks, in communities with laws and enforcement, in a world where nighttime violence is statistically rare. You're safer than any human has ever been. And that's worth something, even if the safety doesn't always translate to feeling safe. Medical care is the obvious gain. Your ancestors with infections, injuries, or chronic pain had few options. Suffer through sleepless nights or die. You have antibiotics, surgery, pain management, access to treatment that allows sleep even during illness, the ability to address the physical causes of sleep disruption. That's a profound gift, even if we've created new sleep problems through modern medicine side effects. Life expectancy is another clear benefit. Your Ice Age ancestors who survived childhood might live to 40 or 50. You have a reasonable expectation of 75 or 80 plus years. Decades more life, which means decades more sleep overall, even if each night's quality is lower. More total rest across a longer lifespan. Though whether quantity can truly compensate for quality is debatable. Climate control means you're never too cold to sleep, never freezing through winter nights, never so hot that rest becomes impossible. Your temperature is always manageable. This is luxury your ancestors couldn't imagine, even if constant temperature eliminates helpful biological cues. Food security means you never sleep hungry, never lie awake with stomach cramping from starvation, never face the stress of wondering if tomorrow brings food. Your basic needs are met, which should create better sleep, even if we've replaced starvation stress with abundant stress. Entertainment and culture are gains too. Your ancestors had stories and songs and social interaction. But you have libraries, movies, music, art from across human history, access to human creativity and knowledge, ways to enrich your waking hours that they never imagined, even if that enrichment sometimes steals from sleep. Technology provides communication across distance. Your ancestors who lost tribe members might never connect again. You can maintain relationships across continents. Know that loved ones are safe even when far away. This reduces some anxieties, even if it creates new ones through constant connectivity. Education and knowledge are broadly accessible. Your ancestors knew what their tribe knew. You have access to humanity's collective wisdom, can learn almost anything if motivated. This is extraordinary, even if information overload contributes to worry and sleeplessness. Freedom from strict tribal roles is significant. Your ancestors' lives were largely predetermined. You have choices, career, location, lifestyle, identity. Agency your ancestors couldn't conceive of. This is liberation, even if choice creates anxiety and decision fatigue. And here's a gain that's harder to quantify: civilization itself. The accumulated achievements of humanity. Art, science, philosophy, technology. Everything we've built together. The modern world, with all its problems and complexity, is still remarkable, a testament to human cooperation and innovation, built on the foundation of agricultural surplus that required sacrificing sleep. Was it worth it? That's the question, isn't it? Would you trade modern life for Ice Age sleep? Most people say no immediately. They don't want to give up medicine, safety, comfort, knowledge, freedom. Don't want to face Ice Age dangers and limitations, even for perfect sleep. But then they lie awake at 3 a.m., exhausted but unable to rest, and wonder, maybe the trade wasn't as good as we thought. Maybe we gave up too much. Maybe sleep was more important than we realized. And we can't undo the trade now. Can't return what was given. Can't reclaim what was lost. We're committed to this path, for better and worse, with all we've gained and all we've lost. Trying to manage both. Trying to keep the benefits of civilization while minimizing the cost to sleep. Trying to have our cake and eat it too. Or in this case, trying to have our modern lives and sleep well too. And mostly failing, because the trade was made thousands of years ago by people who couldn't know the full cost, who didn't realize what they were giving up, who made reasonable choices with limited information, and set humanity on a course we're still following, away from deep, natural sleep, toward complicated, managed rest, for gains that sometimes feel worth it, and sometimes don't, depending on how well you slept last night. Lessons from the last Ice Age. So if we can't go back, what can we learn? What wisdom from 30,000 years ago still applies? What can you actually use tonight, tomorrow night, to improve your sleep, even within modern constraints? First lesson: darkness matters more than you think. You can't recreate Ice Age darkness, but you can make your bedroom darker, much darker. Cover every LED. Install blackout curtains that actually block light. Use a sleep mask if necessary. Your melatonin production will thank you, and you'll sleep deeper. Not Ice Age deep, perhaps, but deeper than you do now. Second lesson: cool your sleeping space. Your ancestors slept in caves around 55 to 60 degrees. You probably keep your bedroom at 68 to 72. That's too warm for optimal sleep. Lower your thermostat. Open a window. Use lighter blankets. Let your body temperature drop naturally. And notice how much easier sleep comes. Third lesson, earn your rest physically. You can't walk 15 miles daily, but you can move more than you do. Take a long evening walk. Do physical work. Exercise intensely enough to create actual tiredness. Not just mental fatigue, but body fatigue. The kind that makes lying down feel like relief. Fourth lesson, embrace darkness's arrival. Stop fighting sunset with bright lights. Dim your environment as evening progresses. Use warm, low lights if you need illumination. Let your brain register that day is ending. That night is coming. That rest should follow. Fifth lesson, manage light temperature, not just brightness. Firelight was 1,800 Kelvin. Your phone screen is 6,500 Kelvin. Use blue light filters after sunset. Switch to warm tone bulbs. Create an evening environment that signals night, not day. Your circadian rhythm will respond. Sixth lesson, reduce future-focused thinking before bed. Your ancestors didn't lie awake worrying about next month. You do, and it destroys sleep. Try to shift toward present tense awareness in evening hours. Not denying problems, but postponing worry. Telling yourself, tomorrow's concerns can wait until tomorrow. Tonight is for rest. Seventh lesson, accept sleep variations. Some nights you'll wake between sleep cycles. That's not insomnia, that's biphasic sleep trying to happen. Don't panic. Don't check the clock. Just quietly breathe, trust that second sleep will come. Honor the pattern your ancestors followed. Eighth lesson, create acoustic comfort. You can't have cave silence, but you can manage your sound environment. Use white noise to mask disruptions, or embrace gentle nature, sounds that trigger ancestral calm. Don't force complete silence. Sometimes consistent sound helps more. Ninth lesson, prioritize communal connection. You probably can't sleep in a tribal pile, but you can maintain social bonds that create security. Connect with loved ones in evening hours. Build relationships that make you feel safe. The psychological foundation of secure sleep starts with belonging, even if you sleep alone physically. 10th lesson, respect seasonal variation. You can't sleep 16 hours in winter, but you can sleep a bit more when days are short. Honor your body's desire for extra rest in darker months. Don't fight the seasonal pull toward more sleep. It's ancestral wisdom trying to express itself. 11th lesson, question sleep rules. Much sleep advice is based on modern assumptions about schedule consistency, about continuous sleep, about what's normal. Your ancestors would find most of it baffling. Trust your body's signals, sometimes over expert advice. 12th lesson, accept that perfect sleep isn't the goal. Your ancestors didn't sleep perfectly every night. They had sick children, threats, discomfort, but they didn't catastrophize one bad night. They knew rest would come eventually. Stop making sleep into a performance you can fail at. Sometimes good enough is actually good enough. And finally, remember that sleep is biological, not moral. You're not failing if you struggle. You're dealing with a fundamental mismatch between ancient biology and modern environment. Be compassionate with yourself. You're trying to sleep in a world that makes sleep difficult. That's not your fault. That's civilization. These lessons won't give you Ice Age sleep. Nothing will. But they might help you sleep a little better, a little more naturally, a little more in alignment with what your body remembers, even if it can't fully reclaim. Small improvements matter. Every bit of better rest helps. And understanding why sleep is hard, that helps too. Not by fixing the problem, but by removing the self-blame, the sense that you're doing it wrong, when really, you're just doing your best. In circumstances that would baffle your ancestors, who'd probably admire your resilience, your ability to function at all, with so little of the rest that they took for granted. The hunter-gatherers who remain. There's something you should know. The Ice Age ended. Agriculture spread. Civilization advanced. But not everywhere. Not for everyone. Some groups never left. Never farmed. Never settled. Never became civilized. They're still out there. Still living as hunter-gatherers. Still sleeping in ways that echo your ancient ancestors. and scientists have studied them, documented their sleep, and confirmed something important. The patterns we've been discussing aren't just theoretical. They're real. They're happening right now. The Hadza people of Tanzania, the Cavemen of Bolivia, the Ache of Paraguay, the San people of Southern Africa. Multiple groups across the world who maintained hunter-gatherer lifestyles into the modern era. And their sleep looks remarkably like what we've been describing. They sleep in communal groups, go to bed shortly after dark, usually within 2 or 3 hours of sunset. Sleep 7 to 9 hours with regular variations. Wake naturally without alarms. Experience biphasic sleep patterns with nighttime waking. Maintain vigilance through the night with rotating wake periods. And this is important. They don't report the chronic insomnia or sleep disorders common in industrialized societies. Not zero sleep problems, but dramatically fewer. Their sleep satisfaction is high. Their sleep feels natural, not struggled for. They're doing what human bodies evolved to do. And it works. Researchers have measured their circadian rhythms, found them tightly synchronized with day-night cycles. Strong, clear melatonin patterns. None of the drift or confusion common in modern populations. They've tracked their activity patterns, confirmed high levels of daily physical exertion. Walking, gathering, hunting, living actively, creating the fatigue that makes sleep inevitable. They've studied their light exposure. Hours of direct sunlight daily. Evening fires, but minimal other artificial light. Darkness that arrives and is honored. They've documented their social structures, communal sleeping arrangements, shared vigilance, and mutual support. The security that comes from never sleeping alone. And they've asked about worry. Found that while hunter-gatherers certainly have concerns, their thought patterns are more present-focused. Less abstract anxiety about distant futures. More immediate problem-solving that can actually be resolved. These aren't primitive people stuck in the past. They're sophisticated cultures who chose different paths, who maintained lifestyles that modern humans abandoned. And their sleep is enviable. Researchers who study them often report feeling humbled, recognizing that these groups have something we've lost, not in technology or comfort or material wealth, but in rest, in the ability to sleep naturally and well. There's an eccentric detail that scientists find striking. When hunter-gatherers are introduced to modern sleeping arrangements, electricity, individual rooms, mattresses, their sleep often deteriorates. What seems like an upgrade to modern people disrupts patterns that were working perfectly. They complain about sleeping alone, about artificial light making them wakeful, about the isolation of modern sleep arrangements. They want to return to their traditional patterns because those patterns work better for human bodies, for human psychology, for actual rest. This isn't romanticizing. Hunter-gatherer life is hard in many ways. High infant mortality, limited medical care, significant dangers. Nobody's suggesting we should all abandon civilization and return to hunting and gathering. But their sleep patterns validate what we've discussed. Prove that human bodies, given appropriate conditions, sleep well. Naturally, without struggle, the way we evolved to sleep. And they demonstrate that the problems aren't inevitable, aren't just part of being human. They're specific to modern civilization, to the choices we've made, to the environments we've created. And here's what might be the most important lesson. These groups show that even in the modern world, even now, different ways of sleeping are possible. Not for everyone, not practically adoptable for most people, but possible, real, still happening. Your ancient ancestors' sleep patterns haven't completely disappeared. They're preserved in these communities, living evidence that humans can sleep differently, better, if the conditions allow. And maybe there's hope in that. Not that you can become a hunter-gatherer, but that the biology still works. That given the right inputs, human bodies still know how to rest. That the capacity hasn't been lost, just suppressed, by environments that fight it, by lifestyles that override it, by civilization that doesn't support it. But the potential remains, waiting, in your DNA, in your neurobiology, in the parts of you that remember. Even if you never get to fully express it, the knowledge that it's there, that you're not broken, that human sleep can work. That might help you rest tonight. Just a little. knowing you're not failing. You're just civilized, and civilization makes sleep hard. But the human capacity for rest, that's still there, still possible, still waiting for conditions that allow it to emerge. Returning to your cave tonight. And now here we are, at the end of our journey, back through 30,000 years, back to tonight, to your bed, to your body, to your sleep. You're not in a cave. You're not in the Ice Age. You're here, now, in a modern world with all its noise and light and complexity. And you can't change that. Can't undo civilization. Can't return to a world that doesn't exist anymore. But maybe you can carry something forward. Some understanding, some compassion, some peace with how hard this is. Because it is hard. Sleep is hard now in ways it never was for most of human history. And that's not your fault. You're not failing. You're just trying to do something natural in an unnatural environment. And that takes effort, acceptance, patience with yourself. So tonight, as you prepare for sleep, remember the darkness. Make your room as dark as you can. Not Ice Age dark, but darker. Every bit helps. Remember the temperature. Let it be cool. Let your body find that ancient comfort in the chill. Remember the rhythm. Let evening be evening. Let light fade as day ends. Honor the transition your body expects. Remember the stillness. Not silence, perhaps, but whatever peace you can create. Whatever sound environment helps you rest. Remember the acceptance. If you wake in the night, that's okay. First sleep ending, waiting for second sleep. Your ancestors did this. It's not insomnia. It's human. Remember the trust. Your body knows how to sleep. Even if civilization fights it. Even if rest feels far away. The capacity is there. Waiting. Remember the community. Even if you sleep alone physically, you're connected to others. To people who care about you. To the long chain of ancestors who survived so you could be here. You belong, even in the darkness, especially in the darkness. And remember this, every night is a small return, not to caves or ice ages or lost worlds, but to something primal, something deep within you, the part that knows how to let go, how to trust the darkness, how to surrender to rest. It's still there, buried under worry and light and noise. But still there. Your cave is inside you. The safe place. The dark place. The place where consciousness can finally release its grip. And maybe tonight you'll find it. Not through effort. Not through trying harder. But through acceptance. Through honoring what you are. Through remembering that you're an ancient creature in a modern world. And that's okay. The struggle is real. But so is the capacity to rest. So is the biology that wants to help you. So is the deep wisdom of 300,000 years of human sleep, flowing through you, even now, even here, as you close your eyes, as you breathe slowly, as you let go of what you can't control, as you trust what comes next. You're not alone in the darkness. You're connected to everyone who's ever closed their eyes and surrendered tonight, to every ancestor who found rest despite danger, to every human who's ever trusted that morning would come. You're part of that chain, that lineage, that long story of human rest. And tonight, you add your chapter. Not perfect, perhaps. Not easy, but yours. Your rest. Your darkness. Your small return to the cave that exists in every human heart. The place where we all go. Eventually. Every night. Despite everything civilization has done to make it harder. We still go there. Still sleep. Still find whatever rest we can. And tomorrow the sun will rise, as it always has, as it did for your ancestors in their caves, as it will for you, here, now, in this modern world, where sleep is difficult but not impossible, where rest is struggled for but not unattainable, where you do your best, and that's enough. It's always been enough. Sweet dreams.